Hogwarts. I really don't want to be a wizard. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26. Filch was defeated and development started from scratch. Filch has decided that he will no longer patrol tonight. He will take this legendary genius to his cabin and listen to Gretel's tearful confession. There is no doubt that he has this ability. He was just a first-year wizard and he had used this method to scare countless students. There is no need to mention expulsion. Just mention that you will take them to see the dean and deduct their points, and you can scare them into begging for mercy all night long. A sinister smile overflowed from the bottom of his heart, and even his face, like a dead tree, became ferocious. If you don't want me to report this matter to your dean, you'd better come with me now. If your confession satisfies me, I can forget about today's incident. What's going on today? What's going on today? Grete had a puzzled expression on his face and looked at Filch with innocent eyes. Of course you went out at night against the rules. You even cast a curse on my lovely Loris. Filch's tone was filled with resentment. Oh, the curse will stop immediately. The petrification curse was lifted on the spot. When Mrs. Norris saw her master in front of her, she turned around and barked at Gretel. Besides, it's just a simple petrification curse. What kind of curse is this? The ease in Grete's tone seemed to have touched Filch's taboo, and his hand holding the lamp trembled. You will regret it, I promise, Grete. You will regret it. Grete calculated the time and estimated that the two little ones had already run away and sent out their own signal. The hidden fox appeared instantly, accompanied by dazzling firelight, and wandered over Gretel's head again. Then, Mr. Filch, I will go back to the tower to rest. If you want to complain, you are welcome to go to Principal Dumbledore's office. I think he has not rested yet. It seems that this is not the first time that fox has been used as a talisman. At least, when it appeared, Filch seemed to have had all his muscles and bones pulled out of his body, and his soaring arrogance disappeared in an instant. Grete left, taking Fox with him as he strutted away from Filch. He didn't pay any attention to Filch, who was trembling with anger. His kindness has never been reserved for such people. He gave me kindness and repaid him with kindness. People like this have malicious intentions deep in their hearts and are always ready to drag others into trouble. He never showed sympathy. Squibs were born, and it was no one else's fault. Even if the wizarding world gave him a chance, the wizarding world would actively help all squibs integrate into muggles. It is even said that they can live a comfortable life in the muggle world without working hard. Filch refused and chose to go to Hogwarts, a wizarding school that cultivates the future of the wizarding world, and become a gatekeeper. Filch's fault was that he was too mean. Because he had no talent, he wanted to torture the little wizard to satisfy his own psychological pleasure. It has been more than a month since school started, and every time I pass by Filch, I can feel the lingering malice in him. If he hadn't encountered it, Gretel wouldn't have looked for an opportunity to stumble. But there are no ifs. Now that he has encountered it, he will not just surrender, not only to protect the two little ones, but also to avenge myself from Filch's malicious eyes. For more than a month back in the tower, Gretel saw the owl squatting on the fireplace. It was Harry Potter's messenger, the snowy owl Hedwig. Gretel, you are finally back. Here, the person who delivered the letter to you has not seen you, and won't let us touch it at all. Opening the letter, sure enough, there was a message from Harry, who had rushed all the way back to the Gryffindor common room, asking about his situation. McGarrett, good news, I have returned to the lounge. I wonder if Filch has made things difficult for you. Thank you for your help today. If I don't receive your reply before dawn, I will go to Professor McGonagall for help, admit my mistake to Professor McGonagall, and get you back. You know, Professor McGonagall is very optimistic about me and hopes that I can help Gryffindor win the Quidditch Cup. Harry Potter. Gretel was helpless. He really didn't know how Harry's mind worked, and he wanted to exchange him for himself. He took the initiative to confront Filch, just to protect the two of them. If he came to find Professor McGonagall, wouldn't he take the initiative to send him to his door. Gretel patted his head and decisively pushed away the idea of making friends with Harry. If she becomes a friend, she will definitely become the nanny of the savior team. At that time, the savior team will be formed. Gretel /U0026 Hermione and his two brainless sons feeling a chill. Gretel quickly wrote a letter that was safe to read and asked Hedwig to take it back to Harry on Friday morning. Grete rarely got up late, but fortunately there was no class in the morning. After replying to Harry's letter last night, Gretel couldn't hold back her excitement and studied the two notes from Dumbledore. Now he was basically certain that the owner of the other note must be the Dark Lord of the generation locked in Ermengarde by Dumbledore. Gellert. Grindelwald. Because a large part of the things recorded in the two notes overlap, but some of the concepts mentioned in them are different. By comparing the two notes, many of Gretel's doubts that he had not understood before were solved. It should be said that Ravenclaw is really the King's College. After all, there are no classes and no one is there to have fun. When Gretel got up, there was no one else in the dormitory. Either he was in the common room pestering his seniors to ask questions, or he went to the library to soak in books. Of course, Gretel is no stranger to this kind of bullying behavior, and he does this to others as well. In other words, the eaglets have become accustomed to chasing knowledge. In their free time, they would rather think about problems than do irrelevant entertainment. Except for Terry, he basically doesn't curl up, or in other words, he only curls up on things he likes. For example, cultivating herbs, Quidditch, or defense against the dark arts. In Terra's words, I'm different from Grete. I'm not interested in becoming omnipotent. I just want to learn what interests me. Grete suspected more than once that the sorting hat was distracted when it sorted Terry. After all, according to Terra's personality, he is obviously more suitable for Hufflepuff or Gryffindor. Just like him, he thought someone as lovable and considerate as him would go to Hufflepuff. Although his talents are also very good, his most outstanding trait is obviously friendliness. Before he came to Hogwarts, he was already thinking about how to lure Cedric, Hufflepuff's best third-year senior, into his research room. Who would have thought that he would be assigned to Ravenclaw and even kidnap Percy's future girlfriend Penelope. Thinking of Penelope, Gretel immediately packed up and went straight to the room of requirement. Through the generous guidance of Professor Voldemort, and after studying the notes of a generation of black and white demons, Gretel already had a bold idea in mind. Compared with dismantling and molding magic spells, it is obviously more trouble-free to complete your own ideas by modifying the magic configuration. After all, every molding spell contains confidentiality measures taken by the researcher intentionally or unintentionally. There are even some theories about magic spells. Even the creator is ambiguous. He knows how to use them and also knows how to teach others to use them. But there is no way to form a systematic theory. So dismantling the curse is really a thankless task. It's different if you build it from scratch. It's like taking apart a program written by someone else and understanding it one by one. Later, you have to modify and adjust it and then embed it into your own framework, which may not be applicable yet. One is to know your own needs and create your own from scratch. Obviously, after having sufficient technical reserves. The second one is definitely simpler. In the past, because I didn't have the ability, I had to borrow from others. Now that ability is no longer an issue. It is natural to develop something of your own. 2 more updates are here. Please continue to ask for recommendation votes. The book Friends are really awesome. I actually cast 34 recommendation votes today. I love you all. Backquote. Thank you for your support. Small theatre Gretel, Akimbo, Squib Filch. Do you know what a Hogwarts bully is now? Do you know what the professor's treasure is? Do you know what the future of the wizarding world is? What level? Stay with me in a castle. Before you leave, bring me your broken door. Filch, holding Dumbledore's thigh and complaining. Headmaster, if you don't slap someone in the face, if you scold someone, you won't expose their shortcomings. I want to file a lawsuit against Gretel. Dumbledore, what happened to him? Filch, he revealed the fact that I was a squib. P.S. Little Gretel is a polite person, but reality is not like this. Please do not increase the text in the small theater. 3. Chapter 27. Thank you, dear Professor Fu. Senior, how far is the dismantling of the Flu network? Gretel. handed over the breakfast in his hand, and picked up Pinello's notes. Pinello looked like he had been studying all night. His hair was messy and his eyes were bloodshot. While he was devouring his food, he told Gretel about his progress. The positioning configuration has been disassembled. The next thing to be disassembled is the transmission configuration. This is the biggest project. After disassembly, it will be modified and adapted to miniaturization. Pinello's tone was full of resentment, and it was clear that he joined as a partner, but now she feels more like a worker whose blood and sweat are being squeezed inhumanely by the capitalists, but there is no other way. Who makes the partner in front of me the big boss? The things I'm researching now all come from other people's ideas. Although the big boss's basic knowledge is incomplete now, he can only rely on himself. But compared with people who come up with ideas, tool people are obviously easier to find. According to the dean, Pinello, you are not the only candidate, just because you are the most free among those who meet the requirements. After all, according to the future described by Gretel, she, Penelope Clavert, will become a hot new capital star in the wizarding world. Within a year, after making results, those pureblood families that have been passed down for hundreds of years may not have as many liquid assets as she has. If Grete hadn't been afraid that someone would be the first to make the results, as soon as he announced his plan, there would be so many people hugging his legs and begging to buy shares. It is enough to dismantle the positioning configuration. We will not dismantle the flu network next. Grete's words almost choked Pinello, and he struggled to swallow the sausage in his mouth. His whole body felt bad. Ever since she learned about Gretel's big plan, Pinello had been studying it day and night. In order to produce results as soon as possible, she devoted almost all her free time except for the necessary classes. I haven't even been to the restroom much recently. I just sit in the research room of the room of requirement every day and fall asleep when I feel sleepy. She would continue to study when she woke up. If Grete hadn't remembered to replenish her food from time to time, she would have starved to death here. Now the big boss won't dismantle it if he says it won't be dismantled. He is really a tool man and has no temper. If he didn't still have sense, Pinello would have wanted to pull out his wand and shoot a stream of water into Gretel's face. I have a new idea. In the past 2 days, our goal is to make a portable information terminal. The transmission magic of the flu network is too difficult for us to modify. We don't need to transmit entities like the flu network. Just being able to transmit information in real time is enough. And another point is that even if we complete the disassembly and analysis, the final modification may not be able to complete our established idea. So why don't we create a suitable configuration from scratch according to our own needs? Pinello thought Grete had some good ideas at first and listened to Grete's explanation seriously. Until something came to her ears. Create a configuration from scratch. She decisively turned her attention back to the food and creating configurations. Pinello still knew how good she was. It's better to fill your stomach quickly and continue dismantling it. Maybe the big boss will figure it out in a few days. Gretel didn't find it strange when he saw her reaction. In the current wizarding world, among 10,000 people, there is not a single person who has not solidified his brain to prove that he had this ability. Gretel took out his wand in front of Pinello. Utopia. Along with the fluctuation of magic power, Pinello's attention was drawn to Gretel. The 360-degree shield with no blind spots is constantly flashing with fluctuations of magic power, which makes people feel extremely safe staying inside. Pinello's eyes lit up. Is this? Gretel didn't explain, but just let Pinello attack her with her strongest spell. Shattered to pieces. After Grete's repeated requests, Pinello tentatively cast the crushing spell. She was worried that the shield would not be able to withstand it, so she obviously did not apply too much magic power. But no matter how much magic is suppressed, Shattered to Bones is still an incredibly powerful offensive spell. Unexpectedly, when the magic spell touched the shield, it didn't even cause the shield to react at all. Just like water flowing into the sea, it moistens things silently. Pinello became interested instantly. As a well-known academic master, she was sure that such a powerful defensive spell did not exist in the magic world today. Those pure-blood families that have been passed down for hundreds of thousands of years don't have it, nor do the goblins who have rebelled many times, but have continued their inheritance. Shattered to pieces, shattered to pieces, shattered to pieces. As a student that even Professor Flitwick praised, Pinello's dueling skills are naturally not bad. The crushing spell was fully fired, and 3 consecutive rounds were fired in a cross-shaped pattern to block Gretel's escape path. She regretted it the moment she cast the crushing spell, and her head suddenly sobered up. After staying up all night. Holding the magic wand in his hand, he was about to cast the spell to save Gretel from danger unexpectedly. Gretel not only did not retreat, but took a step closer and swallowed 3 magic spells from the front. Pinello looked nervous, while Gretel looked confident. The shield was like a water bubble blown by the wind. It shook a few times and then returned to its original shape. Pinello didn't want to try anymore, because even if he attacked again, it would only turn 3 crushing spells into a dozen consecutive arrows. But Grete's magic shield obviously has some leftover power besides. How could a wizard duel be so stupid as to stand and cast spells? Of course, he could hide as much as he could. It is only right to evade and be accompanied by a counterattack. But Gretel's spell is so unreasonable. As long as he puts on such a shield, he is basically invincible. As long as there is enough magic power, the individual rifle can directly transform into the iron-blooded Gundam. Until now, how could Pinello still not understand what Grete meant? The big boss obviously has more advanced technical reserves. As a partner, of course he chooses to obey his words. Yes, this is my own magic spell, Utopia. If you want to learn it, I will teach you. Pinello threw the wand aside angrily and complained, "If I had known that you had the ability to create your own magic spells, I wouldn't have bothered to dismantle the structure. I haven't had a good rest for at least half a month. I'll come back in the evening. This time you will be the main attacker and I will be responsible for assisting you." Pinello seemed to have been relieved of a heavy burden, and his whole body suddenly became energetic. God knows, because she was the only one with enough ability before. How many brain cells she spent in dismantling it. It's better this time. The big boss has the ability to do the project. She just needs to follow him and do the chores and wait for him. Of course Gretel knew how much energy Pinello had put in recently, so he would not be unkind. But then again, who would have thought that dear Professor Voldemort would look down upon a mudblood like him? He even risked being exposed to teach him such an important thing in the defense against the dark arts class, comparing one's feelings with one's own. If Professor Fu was any more decent, he would probably bow down and bow to him. But no, Professor Fu is determined to become the king. If he follows my dear Professor Fu, he will renounce himself from the wizarding world. What's more, the Great White Devil is still watching secretly. If his classmate Zio dares to change jobs, the White Devil will dare to take care of the door himself. You see, every time Leo Deng mentioned his dear Professor Fu to him, the regret hidden in his words almost reached the sky. Therefore, he, the genius wizard Mike McGarrett of Ravenclaw, could only silently thank his dear Professor Fu in his heart. Thanks to the guy who woke up the pig for the tip. Thanks to Mr. D for his monthly pass. Thanks to Mr. Call the Pig for his monthly pass, and thanks to Mr. Bookfriend 201906091436055558 for his monthly pass. Thank you to all the book lovers for their recommendation votes. There are too many votes to thank them all. Not much else to say. I will definitely work hard to write wonderful stories. Small theater Gretel. Today, I would like to pay tribute to our beloved and beloved Professor Tom Riddle and mourn for his contribution to our business landscape. Take a bow, Voldemort, emerging from the grave. Little one, you betrayed my trust, and I will never rest in peace. Gretel stomps on the grave a lot. May the professor rest in peace. Amen. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Harry, Who Makes You Not Harry? After leaving the flying broom with difficulty, Grete secretly made up his mind to hollow out Professor Tom as soon as possible and develop his own flying technique. This flying broom is really annoying. To say that Hogwarts is not short of funds. Why don't they want to replace these old flying brooms with new ones? Even if you don't replace it with a new one, wouldn't it be okay to go back to the factory and renovate it? Few of the seat charms inlaid on it are still intact. Except for those who really love Quidditch. Basically no little wizard can climb off the broom with a smile on his face. Also, Gryffindor and Slytherin, especially Slytherin. Almost all of your family are purebloods, well off and pampered. How can I endure this kind of torture? Shouldn't I wave my magic wand and be more bossy and ask my family to donate a batch of flying broomsticks to the school? I just know how to sit around and fight with the people in the Lion Court every day without doing anything serious. Or Hufflepuff is the friendliest of the four major houses. Watching Gretel staggering, rubbing his ravaged buttocks, he moved towards the tower with difficulty. A little badger actually chased him and stuffed him with a bottle of herbal ointment that was said to be prepared by Professor Sprout to relieve congestion and relieve pain. Without even a chance to say thank you, the little badger stuffed his things and ran away. Yes, I owed a favor. After much thought, Grete decided to repay the favor by teaching the little badger the secret recipe. But after thinking about it, since he started school, so many professors have given him a lot more or less Dumbledore's notes, Professor McGonagall's school emblem, Professor Flitwick as the dean. I don't know how many times he recruited young men. Only the arrogant Professor Snape would give him a venomous tongue. After enduring the potion for so long, not even a drop of it came out of him. Even now, seeing that his skills are becoming more and more proficient, he has begun to be treated as a strong man. Asking him to help with the potion orders placed by others, Grete felt that the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He was probably being prostituted for nothing. Because even if you are a potion master in the field, you must pay enough wages to recruit apprentices. Even the potions prepared by the apprentices can be kept as their own. Gretel, who aspired to become a big capitalist, could not bear this anger and decided to have a quarrel with Snape. It's okay to have no salary, but it's okay to treat him as a strong man. At least you have to turn a blind eye and let him come back with a few bottles of potion that he brewed. Really talking about the success rate, the potion materials he saved must be tens or hundreds of galleons. How long is your brain? Mr. Harry Potter, you should really get a giant monster's head. I think it will be much smarter than you are now. Gretel looked at the billowing smoke coming out of Snape's office and the two people standing at the door of the office, and immediately turned around and left. He only knew that Friday nights had been Harry's private time for the past few weeks. Little did he know that on Friday afternoon, he was already experiencing a mental beating from his father's love rival. If he had known earlier, he would never have chosen such an embarrassing time to come to Snape. McGarrett, come here. Snape was truly worthy of being called a bat monster. Even if he didn't look back, he could tell that the person coming was Gretel. There was no choice but to come to this embarrassing scene. Snape was obviously still angry, while Harry was picking his fingers sullenly, looking very shocked. Snape used a cleaning spell to clean up the messy office. Mr. Potter, I hope you will see Mr. Gretel's operations clearly next. I don't want you to make such a low-level mistake again. When the three returned to the office, Grete saw the still smoking crucible. When I got closer to the crucible, I saw a burnt brown mass at the bottom of the pot. I stirred it up and smelled it, and then looked at the shape. It should be that the hellebore syrup, a necessary ingredient for the moderator, had been boiled down. Gretel couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, what a good guy. He is indeed the son of Bai Guang Cinnabamoles. He is only in first grade, and you ask him to learn how to prepare a demulcent that is almost mandatory for OWL's Professor Snape. Please wake up. Harry is just an ordinary first year student. Do you think that everyone is just like you, a half-blood prince who has been gifted as a potions master since childhood? Have you seen what the potion is? Snape said in a sinister voice. Okay, let's start testing me again. After discovering that Gretel was really gifted, crossed out, cheated, Snape became even more strict with his teaching methods. From time to time, he would take out a failed potion and ask him to identify what kind of potion it was, and also to analyze the potion materials. The Ingredients for the demulcent are half a small silver cauldron of water, a moonstone ground into powder, 10 porcupine quills and a unicorn horn ground into powder, and 1/2 of a valerian root. Pints of hellebore syrup. Obviously, Gretel's answer satisfied Snape. Get the potion and operate it yourself. Snape's voice was almost squeezed out of his nasal cavity. Mr. Potter, open your eyes and see how others operate it, although I don't expect you to be a monster. The same brain can remember, grind and sieve the moonstone, porcupine quills, and unicorn horn respectively, weigh them according to the required amounts, and store them separately before Grete starts the next step. Snape struck Harry gloomily from the side. See, take care of all the materials in advance, and put them in a convenient place to prevent mistakes, while you are busy. When the hellebore root syrup was added, Snape coughed slightly, reminding Harry to pay attention to Gretel's operation. Not caring about complaining about Snape, who was so arrogant, Gretel carefully controlled the flames to keep the potion from boiling. When the 7 minutes are up, immediately add the hellebore root syrup to turn the potion into turquoise color, and continue to boil until the potion emits silvery white vapor that indicates success. Set aside to cool and serve. Mr. Potter, do you understand? Do you need me to help you replace the head of a troll? Yes, Professor. The flames were too high when I added the hellebore syrup, Harry replied honestly. It was the first time Gretel saw someone whose pupils could contain two emotions of admiration and frustration at the same time. Perhaps today's blow to Harry had fully demonstrated his venomous nature. When Snape turned to Gretel, there was a rare gentleness in his tone. Well, Mr. Gretel, I remember that today is not the day for your confinement. What are you doing here? Gretel couldn't say that he was here to negotiate, because he had already put a bottle of demulcent into his pocket when they were packed. The strange thing is that Snape clearly saw it, but did not stop it. Gretel had reason to suspect that Snape was giving Harry eye drops, but there was no evidence. Gretel, who was feeling guilty, naturally couldn't say anything, so he had to interrupt. Nothing. I just thought that, Professor, you probably haven't eaten, so I came here to see if you need me to go to the restaurant and bring you a meal. When did you see me having dinner in the office? Snape's tone did not waver at all. In order to avoid being angered, Gretel quickly slapped him and walked away from Harry. In Harry's pitiful look for help, Gretel gave him a helpless expression and ran away in a flash. Until leaving the underground, Snape's inhumane troll sarcasm could be heard. But so what, Harry? Who makes you not Harry? Wow. There is another monthly pass. Thank you to the boss of Civilization Observer for your monthly ticket. And thank you to the boss of Queho Fan for your monthly ticket. Thank you for your kindness. Small Thea to Gretel, shaking the potion bottle evilly. Harry, would you like to try this bottle of sex-changing potion? I believe Professor Snape will love you to death. Harry, waving his hands with a frightened look on his face. Don't come over here. Chapter 29 Daily Life with Professor Voldemort. October 24. It's been 2 weeks since Gretel agreed to be Dumbledore's little spy and get everything he wanted. With Dumbledore's tacit approval, Gretel would visit Quirrell Thiro's office from time to time. However, every time he left there, Gretel would always take turns to undergo all-round testing by Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick. Even if it weren't for the special nature of the soul, Professor Flitwick would have wanted to use the goblin spell to test Gretel's soul. Even though Dumbledore still hadn't revealed Quirrell's true identity to them, they were still ready. After all, the irrepressible smell of black magic made the two of them feel like they were facing a new generation of Dark Lord. Even compared to the Dark Lord who cannot be named, Quirrell is accompanied by an unspeakable madness in the current research room. Pinello himself has become a complete toolman. After all, research was not what she was good at, and her talent was not enough to support her in conducting such creative research. More than once, Pinello said that she was no longer a qualified partner and discussed with Grete that otherwise she would just have to work for free during the current period. What Grete said was that an oath is a promise. The moment the contract was established, she was already a partner, regardless of whether she could contribute to future research. After all, the situation at that time was that he needed her knowledge. This kind of behavior of burning bridges would never happen to him in the past, present, or future. Ever. Since Gretel finished speaking that day, Pinello had completely gotten on Gretel's boat. However, Grete and Pinello's research has come to a standstill. Creating something from scratch is far more difficult than copycatting. Fortunately, there is still dear Professor Voldemort who can explode gold coins. Professor, do you have time now? Grete carefully knocked on the door of the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office. It wasn't until he heard a suppressed cough of agreement that he quietly entered the door. Professor, you don't look good. Would you like to go to Madame Pomfrey's and have a look? Gretel swore to God that he was definitely not concerned about Quirrell's body. What he was worried about was that Quirrell's body bones were not strong enough to support his dear Professor Tom Riddle to help him overcome the difficulties. Because of his espionage, he and Dumbledore had a good idea of Quirrell's physical condition. Late one night, two figures, one large and one small, simultaneously turned their thoughts to the unicorn in the Forbidden Forest. Dark Lord who is dying of illness will definitely find ways to delay the deterioration of his body. In order to achieve his goals, of course, you must not go to the infirmary, and your former subordinate Severus Snape, the Dark Lord, simply couldn't believe it in this situation. Then the only thing he can think about is the unicorn in the Forbidden Forest. The blood of unicorns can help him extend his life. As for the curse, does Voldemort care about him? He wasn't the one drinking blood anyway, so of course there was a fool to help him bear the curse. In other words, does the Dark Lord himself care? He can be so ruthless as to split his soul into a Horcrux, so how could he care about the curse? With the cooperation of one large and one small, the Game Warden Hagrid, under the guidance of Dumbledore, notified the Centaurs tribe, the leaders in the Forbidden Forest. Only centaurs who live with nature day and night can gain the trust of unicorns and keep them away from the dangers at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Without the last replenishment, Voldemort was far weaker than himself in another timeline. If it weren't for the life-extending potion bought on the black market, Quirrell would have been unable to support Voldemort's soul. Of course, the valuable potions almost depleted Quirrell's small treasury. He has mentioned to his master more than once that frequent switching of the souls that dominate the body will speed up the collapse of the possession spell. But he didn't get Voldemort's approval. Master, your soul is already very weak. If you continue like this, I'm worried that you will fall into a deep sleep. Without your help, it is impossible for me to obtain the Philosopher's Stone from Principal Dumbledore. Quirrell begged. A heartbreaking cutout of the bones had already expressed the owner's anger. Since begging was useless, Quirrell had no choice but to think of other ways. Master, you may not know that McGarrett is a mudblood. Don't you hate mudbloods the most? How about we capture him? I got a magic from the Banshee. Sacrificing his soul can help you replenish your life force. The heartbreaking pain of tearing out the bones 1 second had not disappeared, and the next second he received the rain-like gift from his master. The continuous heartbreaking and bone-cutting efforts made him completely give up the idea of sowing discord. I need you to teach me how to do things, Voldemort warned in a calm tone. Don't ever let me hear you plotting against Gretel again, otherwise the Cruciatus curse won't be given to you next time. Professor Voldemort liked Gretel's name. Unlike all the other students in the school, Gretel never used the nasty word Quirrell when calling him. It was even said that the title Grete gave him was very different from that given to other professors. He is never called by any name. How unique. This is a student who is in tune with his soul. In Voldemort's eyes, Gretel was his only student, even if the student didn't know that he was borrowing the body of a servant to teach him. Voldemort could tell that Gretel's title was for him. Every word professor has nothing to do with the body he is currently inhabiting. It belongs to him alone. The great Professor Voldemort, the great Professor Tom Riddle. When he heard Gretel knocking on the door, he forcibly took Quirrell's body, ignoring the wine and the servant's soul. My dear student comes to ask for advice again, and I want to show him my wonderful ideas. My body is fine. It's an old problem. You know, a mature wizard will inevitably encounter several dangers in his life. Voldemort hesitated. He immediately raised his chin and stared at his student, preparing to help him solve the problems he caused. Tell me, I encountered some unsolvable problem again this time. Gretel looked up and down with concern first, making sure that Voldemort would not fall asleep suddenly in the middle, and then took out his notebook. This had happened twice before today. Without the replenishment of unicorn blood, Voldemort's incomplete soul and Gretel's riddled body were really not enough to support him in sharing his thoughts with Gretel for a long time. Gretel really has no acting skills. If Gretel hadn't cooperated, the story of one body and two souls would have spread throughout Hogwarts. Professor, as you mentioned last time, you can first study the transmission configuration of the Flu network and the transmission configuration of the door key. I've researched it. But it's still an old problem. What I want to achieve is the transmission of information. These two configurations implement the transmission of physical objects. I can't add a front-end information processing module. But this deviates from my original research goal. It is even said that taking this extra step would seem cumbersome and unnecessary. Upon hearing the familiar title of Professor, Voldemort's eyes narrowed again in comfort. After hearing the following question, Voldemort took out his wand and hit Gretel on the head. Grete did not hide. He was used to Professor Fu's punishment. Yes, this was Professor Fu's punishment for not realizing his own thinking. The first time, he would freeze up and prepare to dodge, but now he is used to it, and there is no magic spell on the wand anyway. It wasn't even a knock, just a tap on his head. Thank you to Mr. Xiushi Shianlu for your monthly ticket support. Thank you to all the book friends for your 32 recommendation votes. I love you all. Backquote. Comparison small theater Voldemort. Gretel, come with me. I will teach you everything I have learned in my life. Gretel, how about you come with me, and I will take you on board the ship of the new era. Voldemort, Dumbledore, good fellow, did you really create another Dark Lord? Gretel, Principal, are you thinking too much? If you don't mind, could you come on board and take a look? 5 insurances and 1 fund, including food and housing. Chapter 30 A foolproof Halloween. You tell me, you can obviously come up with this kind of idea that subverts the times. So why do you want to get into this dead end? The purpose of asking you to study portkeys and Flu networks is not to ask you to study their transmission configurations, but to allow you to make inferences based on their transmission principles. We are wizards. What is a wizard? Our own heart replaces the heart of heaven. Whether it's the Flu network or the portkey, the structure of the transmission is not the most important. The wizard's will contained in it is what I want you to experience. I understand that you are from the Muggle world and have never been exposed to magic before. But you are already a wizard now. You have to give up the idea of Muggles. Why do you have to get into the trap of teleportation? I admit that you are very smart, but try to use your smartness to fight against thousands of years of wizard civilization. Do you think you can do it? Your teacher and I have never had this idea. I can tell you clearly that the current magic configuration has developed to the point where it cannot be perfected. You want to create a new basic configuration from scratch, which I don't like. You can think about it. Even physical objects can be sent. Why can't you send a simple message? After listening to Professor Voldemort's words, Gretel fell into deep thought. What he wants to do is an information terminal based on magic. So why should we consider how to convert virtual information? It is obviously faster to transfer information directly. He just needs to let the wizards will control the terminal as needed. Even if his final market is the Muggle world, so what? There are so many spells that can feel the will of Muggles. Although the final product will appear to be extremely high-tech, what impact will it have? As long as it does not affect its use, it will not have any impact on sales. To a certain extent, it would even help to eliminate copycats everywhere. At least, Muggles wouldn't be able to copy cats, right? He had been a Muggle for too long, and just like wizards who were imprisoned by traditional thinking, his thinking was also imprisoned. Who said that terminals must have operating platforms. Isn't it good to take a big step into the era of consciousness control? The information input module can be modified using the will control configuration, and the information transmission module can be implemented with slight restrictions on the transmission configuration. The information reading module is even simpler, and the magic spell used by the Daily Prophet on the newspaper can be used directly. In this way, He only needs to consider how to perfectly connect the various configurations, seeing Gretel's eyes becoming brighter and brighter. The corners of Voldemort's mouth also turned up. He knew what the student in front of him was going to do. Unlike an old antique like him who had lived for decades, the wizards of the new age were tired of the time the messengers were wasted on the road. He could understand Gretel's thoughts. Just as he was tired of wizards being forced into a corner by muggles, he wants to rule the wizarding world and then use the same high-handed methods to conquer humans. This was one of the things he admired about Gretel. It's not scary for a person to have ideas. What's scary is that he gets used to life and then comforts himself to accept his fate and do nothing. He had already made up his mind to use his true identity to accept this student. After obtaining the Philosopher's Stone and gaining eternal life. Voldemort believed that under his training, Gretel would become the brightest star in the world. Gretel thanked Voldemort with gratitude and told him to take good care of himself. In Voldemort's pleased eyes, Gretel ran away excitedly. Even if you already have an idea to solve the problem, the finished product cannot be completed in a day or two. But it can be regarded as a bit of a burden being lifted off my shoulders for 4 or 5 days. Gretel had a smile on his face. Even Harry, who had made up his mind to stay away, could come to him and ask him questions he didn't understand. 2 days before Halloween, Hermione came over. Different from the usual expression of curiosity on her face, her mood was a little depressed, and her shiny front teeth looked dim. Gretel, I want to ask you how you get along so well with other people, and why I often help them solve their problems, but I'm still isolated by them. Hermione's face was full of confusion and grievances that she had nowhere to express. Of course, Gretel noticed Hermione's situation. It could be said that Hermione was no longer isolated, but was nakedly disliked. 11 years old is the age when you can make friends without any worries. No matter what conflicts there are, they will basically not last until the next day. But Hermione was different. Except for the first 2 weeks of school. After that, Gretel didn't see any companions around Hermione. When eating and attending classes, I was basically alone. Even when a group of lion cubs surrounded Gretel, begging with pleading faces to learn from his homework. As soon as Hermione came closer, they immediately dispersed, as if they were avoiding some plague. They continued to come closer until Hermione moved away. If he and Hermione were not so familiar, Gretel would like to say something chicken soup for the soul, such as that all geniuses are lonely. The strong are always lonely, while the weak stick together. But there was no way. Since the last time in the library, he and Hermione seemed to have a little secret in common, and became more and more familiar. Basically, no matter what happened, Hermione could always be seen wandering around him holding a notebook. Hermione, have you ever considered that it's because you are very defensive? You were afraid that others would laugh at you for coming from the Muggle world, so you studied hard and tried to become the best among them. You are afraid that they will look down on you, so you keep holding your neck high to show off your standout. I know, and you are indeed very talented, just like Professor Flitwick praised you when he formally taught us the first charms class as a wizard from Muggles. You mastered the levitation spell before they did, and you mastered it so skillfully. Professor Flitwick's exclamation must make you very proud. Oh, well done. Look at Miss Granger, she has succeeded. Did you notice that at that moment, the way you looked at them was showing off, and even when they asked you for advice, your tone sounded like giving alms. However, you have to know that they are your classmates, not your competitors, at least not now. They ask you for advice because they believe that you are from the same college and in the same grade. You yourself also know that it is not necessary for you. There are so many people in the whole school. If you don't teach, there will always be someone willing to teach, right? You don't need to be so proud. Maybe try to treat everyone gently. Grete's words seemed to give Hermione a blow in the head. So much so that in the next few days, Hermione seemed a little distracted. But Gretel couldn't help with this kind of thing. Even if he went across the academy to help Hermione and told her that she didn't want others to isolate her, it would have the opposite effect. This matter can only be solved internally by the little lions. Only when someone among them is willing to accept her from the bottom of their hearts can Hermione get out of her current predicament. In a blink of an eye, it's Halloween Eve. In order to prevent Quirrell from causing any further trouble, Gretel approached Dumbledore early. I think that person will cause havoc tonight. Everyone will gather in the restaurant tonight. He will definitely not miss this opportunity, cause a commotion, and then take advantage of the chaos to seize the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore followed Gretel's advice, closed all entrances and exits in the afternoon, and placed a powerful protective spell on the entrances and exits. According to Dumbledore, even if the entire Ministry of Magic came, they still couldn't break through the door of Hogwarts. It can be said that Gretel believed in him far more than Dumbledore himself. Now that he had Dumbledore's guarantee, he would of course enjoy his first Halloween after entering the wizarding world. In the past, in the orphanage, Mrs. Swan would take all the children to pray on the night before Halloween. So, since he came to this world, he has not experienced the strange Halloween culture. Today, he was going to indulge himself. 4 new books. It is really important to read them, especially on Tuesdays. I hope that the book lovers can support me and click on the book to the last page on Tuesday until the ranking of readings appears. I beg you. Thank you. In addition, for the health of all book lovers, future updates of this book will be adjusted during the day as much as possible, and if you refuse to stay up late, start with you and him. Backquote. Thank you. Good night. Small Thea to Gretel. My dear Headmaster Dumbledore, tonight will be perfect. Dumbledore, combing his beard confidently. Of course. Quirrell, Voldemort. Don't worry, I will take action. Chapter 31 Troll Brigade, please follow up. Grete had never celebrated Halloween, but he had seen it through the door of the orphanage. The children took the jack-o'-lanterns made by their parents and dressed themselves up as various legendary monsters, going door to door begging for candy from neighbors, shouting trick or treating. Compared with Christmas, Halloween is children's favorite holiday. Only on this day, even the most serious families will indulge their children. For once. The curfew and everything else are lifted, allowing the children to have a good time. It was a carnival for Muggle kids. Of course Hogwarts is different. At least, the Halloween costumes look much more elaborate than those in the Muggle world. The pumpkin head opens its mouth to tease the little wizard. The wall suddenly spits out smoke, and Peeves is obviously more noisy than usual. Only today will Peeves not be sanctioned by Bloody Baylor overnight. The entire school was surrounded by a Halloween atmosphere. Even standing in front of the tower window, you can see a huge pumpkin monster specially arranged in the open space in front of the Forbidden Forest. To say that the most comprehensive layout is of course the restaurant. The torch turned into a pumpkin head filled with candles, and countless silhouettes of monsters in the dark clouds suddenly appeared, accompanied by thunder and lightning from time to time. The bats were either hanging upside down from the ceiling or clinging to the wall to rest. Most of them were flying through the dark clouds, passing over the wizard's head at low altitude from time to time, causing the little wizard to exclaim in surprise. Fortunately, nothing strange fell from the bat. Grete picked up a piece of steak with peace of mind and admired the wizard's Halloween. Ordinarily, Dumbledore has arranged everything, so Gretel should feel relieved. But he always seemed a little absent-minded, thinking about something constantly in his mind. Suddenly, Gretel stopped talking. He thought about why he was absent-minded. Secret passages. Yes, secret passages. Ever since the day Hogwarts was built, there have been countless secret passages. Even after countless students' night tours, they still haven't explored all the secret passages. Gretel didn't believe it at all that Voldemort didn't know the secret passage. Even Quirinacillo, who is known for his honesty, may have his own secret passage that he often uses. He believed that Dumbledore had made Hogwarts as airtight as possible. But except for its builder, no one knows exactly how many secret passages there are. Even in the past few centuries, if someone had been recognized by the castle, it was not impossible to build his own secret passage. Neither he nor Dumbledore had thought about this issue in the past few days, but it's too late. The door of the restaurant was opened with a bang, and Quirinacillo rushed into the restaurant. According to the original world line, the troll is in the underground classroom just in time to pass out on the floor. Gretel turned his gaze to Dumbledore, but only saw confidence in those blue eyes. Yes, as the principal of Hogwarts, with the greatest authority in this castle, how could he ignore the existence of the secret passage? Looking at Quirrell lying on the ground pretending to be dead, Gretel knew that this was a confrontation between the black and white devils. If Dumbledore blocked all the roads, Voldemort might be deadlocked. In the battle between trapped beasts, surrounding 3 buildings, and leaving a secret passage is just right. Quiet. When the students were about to get into chaos, Dumbledore raised his wand and set off several fireworks spells, attracting everyone's attention. Prefect, take all students back to your respective college dormitories. Gretel grabbed Terry as he left the castle and headed for the tower. Cover me, I need to leave for a while. For some reason, Grete felt more and more flustered as he walked away. Thinking of Quirrell's body recently, Gretel always felt that things might not be as simple as the original world line. When Gretel arrived in the underground classroom, everyone was shocked. What a troll. Here comes a whole tribe of trolls. There must be more than 10 stinky monsters, big and small. The smallest one is over 10 feet tall, and its dull skin exudes a pungent odor all the time. Each troll dragged his own weapon in his hand and struck everything he encountered with the club unscrupulously. The 3 little ones were pale and running for their lives with frightened expressions on their faces. Fortunately, the giant monster's body, like a mountain of meat, was not enough to support them in running, and they could not catch up with the pace of the 3 little ones for the time being. However, the trolls are so huge that even taking 1 step can equal the little wizard running 4 or 5 steps. If nothing else happens, they will be caught up before leaving this corridor. I don't know which of the 3 little ones was unlucky, but the giant monster, who never used his brain, actually thought of throwing. He picked out the mud that had rolled up from nowhere and threw it in the direction of the 3 of them. When all the mud was gone, he threw away the broken wooden doors and dismantled stones until he threw away the wooden stick in his hand that was taller than a man. Utopia. Gretel's Utopia successfully deflected the wooden stick that was about to bring disaster and appeared in front of the 3 of them. Ignoring the moved glances of the 3 people, Grete stepped forward to greet them. Keep running. Don't be stunned. Run upstairs and take the trolls over. I see the professors have all gone upstairs. Petrification curse, stunning curse, imprisonment curse, obstacle curse. Countless curses spurted out from the tip of the stick like arrows. Unfortunately, as a magical creature, the troll's greatest characteristic is its own magical inertia. The damaging spell hit the giant monster without causing any ripples at all. In terms of effectiveness, it is not even as good as taking the time to throw out a few tables and chairs with a floating spell. At least the tables and chairs can make them stop and smash them. The 3 of them were yelled by Gretel and finally woke up from the daze after being rescued from the impending disaster and ran silently. Gretel retreated while causing trouble for the trolls. Looking at the menacing giant monster, Gretel sighed inwardly. It's worthy of you for such a big occasion, Professor Tom. As early as a few days ago, when he went to collect Voldemort's wool and only saw the stammering Quirrell, he knew that something big was going to happen in the near future. Without the unicorn blood to survive and being harvested by him all day and night, Quirrell was not only drained of fuel, but also drained of his strength. In order to save one's life, taking desperate risks is an inevitable choice. The professors must not know that there are people in the underground classroom. After all, who would have thought that someone would hide in the underground bathroom and cry on Halloween? However, since the trolls were causing so much noise, sooner or later someone would have to come down and take a look. As expected, not long after, Professor McGonagall took the lead. Snape and Quirrell followed closely behind and appeared underground. Gretel saw the battle scene of an adult wizard for the first time. Professor McGonagall is indeed the Professor of Transfiguration. With a wave of her wand, tough vines sprouted from the head of the pumpkin specially decorated for Halloween. Under the control of Professor McGonagall, the vines seemed to have a life of their own, tying up the ugly giant monsters in front of them. The broken doors and windows also transformed into shackles, locking up the culprit who broke him. Even the wooden stick used as a weapon in the troll's hand was released under Professor McGonagall's disarming spell, and then turned into wooden figures and pounced on it. Snape, on the other hand, took the cold shoulder and threw away the failed emulsant as a powerful anesthetic. Gretel was quite suspicious that these failures came from Harry. Counting the potion bottles that were thrown out, Gretel couldn't help but pray for Harry's head. I pray that Snape won't come to Harry with the troll's head for head replacement surgery later. As for Quirrell, of course Professor Quirrell stood by and cheered them on. God knows how much he paid to bring these giant monsters in. Anyway, Gretel saw that Quirrell would tremble in pain every time Snape released a divine blade. With the professor's help, Gretel was finally able to let go and rest. Not far up the road, I saw 3 people standing timidly in the corner. Both Harry, Ron and Hermione looked pale, and it seemed that they were really frightened. I had no choice but to take out the demulcent pill from my small bag and handed it over. Thank you all the book lovers for your recommendation, votes and support. There is another chapter around 10 o'clock, so I won't delay all the book friends from sleeping. I hope you will read it, backquote, and compare your thoughts. Small theater. Dumbledore, Actor A, Tom, you shouldn't be here. Voldemort, Actor B, you know I'm coming, and I know you know I'm coming, but I have to come. Throw the horn and rush forward. Director, Kakaka, what is this acting? One of you is good and the other is evil, one is black and the other is white. There are not so many entanglements. When you meet, you should kill each other indiscriminately. The more brutal the killing, the better. Come on, reshoot. Each group prepares. The third act of the Halloween battle. Action. Chapter 32. It's all Quirinus Chiro's fault. Chapter 32. It's all Quirinus Quirrell's fault. This small bag of traceless stretching spells was also a gift from Voldemort. One time before, Gretel encountered a big problem. In order to facilitate the professor to analyze it for him, he brought in almost all relevant documents and notes. Even with the floating spell, he moved it back and forth twice. Afterwards, Voldemort gave him such a small light grey bag to facilitate his daily life. The space of the traceless stretching spell is not large, only 1 cubic meter, which is enough for daily life. Since receiving this gift, Gretel has carried almost all of his important belongings with him. However, every time Quirrell saw him taking something out of his bag, he didn't know why. I can't help but twitch the corners of my mouth. Don't look at the giant monsters of this tribe crushing the little wizard. When the 2 deans joined forces to fight against the enemy, even if they were thick-skinned and thick-bodied, they couldn't last more than 10 minutes. After dealing with the troll with Snape, McGonagall walked up the stairs with a serious face, and the atmosphere on the stairs almost dropped to freezing point. Quirrell was left to clean up the battlefield and deal with the dirty trolls. You don't need to explain. The principal told everyone to go back to the common room with the prefects, but you actually appeared here. If we hadn't arrived in time, you would have become food for the trolls. The 3 little ones, who had just calmed down and had a little more color on their faces, suddenly became stiff again after hearing Professor McGonagall's words. 10 points from everyone present. Professor McGonagall's tone was stern, and her decisive momentum suppressed everyone, including Gretel. Seeing that Snape seemed to be unsatisfied, he was eager to try. Harry, who had been with him for a long time, was keenly aware of the danger and directly admitted his mistake. Yes, Professor, we admit our mistake. We shouldn't have been so reckless. We won't do it next time. Ron, on the side, also admitted his mistake. Hermione tried to stand up and say it was because of herself, but Harry and Ron held her hands tightly behind her back, preventing her from seeking death in front of Snape. Gretel crossed his arms calmly. The crisis had been resolved anyway, and he was no longer frightened. Deductions are not a problem for him. The points he has earned from the beginning of school to now are enough for him to waste dozens of times. I don't know if it was because Harry gave in and Snape no longer had the enthusiasm to spit venom at him. Snape actually pointed the finger at Gretel. Mr. Gretel, you really made a big splash today. Carrying the attacks of more than a dozen giant monsters and retreating as he walked. He had such a magical hand. In my opinion, there is no need for you to continue studying at Hogwarts. Just graduate early. The Auror office appreciates brave wizards like you the most. Otherwise, you can pack up and report tomorrow. I can write you a letter of recommendation as head of Slytherin. Gretel has already figured out Snape's temperament. Once he starts to irritate you, be sure not to say anything. Otherwise you will be drowned by the venom point on one side. Snape kept lecturing Gretel, while on the other side, McGonagall finally softened her tone and asked about the situation at that time point. After understanding the situation at the time, Professor McGonagall made the final decision point. Although deducted points cannot be erased, they can be added for other reasons. However, death penalty can be avoided, but living crime cannot be escaped. Although points will not be deducted, other punishments will still be imposed. In order to warn other little wizards, the four of them will help Hagrid clean the Quidditch pitch in November until the Quidditch game is over. A few days before the Quidditch game, Grete huddles in the room of requirement to escape the cold November weather in Great Britain. Pinello was on the sidelines using magic power to outline the magic configuration that had been basically made, and was conducting final inspections. Gretel, why haven't I seen you running to Professor Quirrell's office recently? Gretel said angrily, the professor is not here, so I can only listen to stories there. After saying that, he huddled himself into the warm blanket again. The winter in Great Britain was the kind of dampness that penetrated into the bone marrow. He really couldn't bear it. Pinello listened and felt a little strange. Didn't Professor Quirrell stay in his office every day? When was it gone? Calculating the time, after Halloween, Voldemort has not been seen for more than 10 days now. The professor of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class that Ravenclaw and Slytherin take together has also become the Story King. Quirrell. It's not that the students didn't raise questions, it was just that the person who asked the question was deducted 10 points. No one would dare to mess with this Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, who seemed submissive, but had the power to deduct points. Even the most knowledgeable little wizard could never imagine that there are two souls in this body. Sometimes, Gretel even wondered whether Dumbledore couldn't hold himself back and pinned his respected Professor Voldemort to death on the night before Halloween. It wasn't until Dumbledore met with him to learn about Voldemort's current situation that he realized that Voldemort didn't appear at all that day. According to Dumbledore's explanation, Voldemort's remnant soul was already very weak because it had not been replenished with vitality for a long time. He was so weak that Quirrell had already acted according to the plan, but he fell into a deep sleep and was completely unable to steal the Philosopher's Stone. However, according to Dumbledore's observation, Voldemort's soul will reawaken around Christmas at most. Quirrell has been extremely emotional recently because another soul in his body is about to wake up. Thinking of this, Gretel couldn't help but urge, "Senior sister, we have to speed up. I want to make the samples before and after Christmas." For no other reason than to hand over the sample to Professor Voldemort before he takes off his vest. Say more than say, Professor Fu must take at least 50% of the credit for this project to develop to its current level. It can be said that without the help of Professor Fu, this project would have taken several years to produce results. If it is delayed until Pinello graduates and no results are achieved, then after the oath is automatically lifted, the Crevet family will automatically obtain tickets to a new era. This is why Pinello's father agreed to Pinello's signing of the Unbreakable Vow. Even though Pinello has now degraded and basically does not participate in research, Gretel still does not want to lose this partner who can be completely trusted. Although she does not have creative research talents, she has extraordinary communication and organizational skills. Professor Flitwick told her more than once that she should learn to establish authority so that she could better manage little wizards in the future. There are still 3 years left to graduate. When she graduates, she can become the executive of Gretel Communications Company and even the future Gretel business empire. Therefore, even from the perspective of retaining Pinello, the credit for success must be appropriately distributed to Professor Fu to be worthy of his conscience. But on the other hand, even if results are achieved, it is impossible to give Professor Fu even a tiny bit of profit. It would not be a good thing if that person had countless wealth that was entirely his own. Therefore, Gretel thought about using samples to share the joy of the project's success with Professor Fu. At least, it made him feel that this year's professorship was not in vain. On a clear, cold day, the Quidditch game took place as scheduled. On a big day like this, even though he didn't like watching football games, Grete still came to the stadium with his roommates in a gregarious manner. God knows why Quirrell recited the curse on the field. Maybe he wanted to help his master get rid of a serious problem. Didn't he think that with so many wizards present, couldn't he find someone who was good at levitation? Gretel felt that his master was asleep, otherwise he would not be allowed to do such a thing, and maybe he will be severely punished for his stupid behavior. Let's not talk about whether it can defeat a life or death enemy, just saying that it may anger Dumbledore is not a worthwhile thing. In addition, because of the Halloween punishment, we have been together for so long, so we can be considered friends to some extent. When Harry staggered in the air, Gretel approached Quirrell. Hey, Professor, it's too crowded where I am. If you don't mind, I can sit next to you. Before he finished speaking, without waiting for Quirrell's consent or rejection, Gretel sat down next to Quirrell. Harry, if you have a conscience, don't drag me into the war with you in the future. I have really given too much. After sitting down, Gretel realized why there was such a large open space around Quirrell. Because he smells so bad. Gretel swore that the trolls smelled better than Quirrell. Professor Tom Riddle, you have really worked hard for enduring the humiliation. It's not your fault you don't have a nose. It's all Quirinus Quirrell's fault. Thank you to book friend 20210631617466648343755 for your award support, and thank you for your monthly ticket support. Thank you book friends for your recommendation votes and support. Thank you all for your continued reading. Thank you. Our small theater. A letter to my daughter. Dear Pinello, my daughter, I believe in your vision. You have always been so good. If you feel it is necessary, in principle, I can agree to you signing an unbreakable oath under the witness of Professor Flitwick. Professor Flitwick will definitely protect every one of his students. In fact, if possible, I even hope that Dumbledore will be a witness to your oath. However, the apple of my eye, my dear Pinello, my daughter, no matter how good your vision is, I cannot agree to an oath without a time limit. If another vow accepts a time limit, I will not stop it. In view of this, I hope you can have a good communication. In advance. Love you forever, Father. Oneg Valkrivet Chapter 33 Christmas. When I'm busy, I don't always notice the passage of time. When Hogwarts ushered in the first winter snow, Gretel realized that it was almost Christmas. Gretel left the room of requirement after a long absence and wandered in the snow with Pinello. Senior, I'm sorry that I made you do useless work for so long. Grete apologized to Pinello in embarrassment. Just a few days ago, with the help of Pinello, Grete finally succeeded in making the first batch of samples according to his idea. A magic information terminal that looks like a smartphone, with a fully handmade casing and pure magic movement, and is suitable for all series of magic screen projections. Until he distributed the samples to people he knew well for testing, Grete felt that he had made a product that transcended the times, until Gretel visited Hagrid, who was trying out samples. Gretel, but this thing is not very useful. If it is just to deliver the message as quickly as possible, it can be done by disapparating. Even if apparition cannot span too long distances, it won't take much time to use door keys fixed around the world. The practicality of this thing is really poor. It was only then that Grete realized why Big Brother had appeared in the Muggle world, but the communication method in the Wizarding world was still the ancient carrier pigeon. It's obvious that Muggles invented the train, and Hogwarts is happy to use it. As for why I didn't learn the communication methods of Muggles, that's because communication has never been a problem for wizards, because Muggles travel far away. They have to study information terminals to reduce the time and resources required to transmit information. But compared to Muggles' journeys, which can take hours or even days, even if wizards want to cross the earth and reach the other side, they only need to make a few door key changes for the Muggle world. This product is indeed transcending the times, but for the Wizarding world, it is not even considered useless according to his original idea. His product would take the magic world by storm in various countries, and he would also be able to earn his first pot of gold from it. He had been a Muggle for too long, and it wasn't until Hagrid woke him up that he realized that all this was just his own imagination. After all, even in the Muggle world, rigorous market research will be conducted at the beginning of the development of any product. No wonder, no matter which professor he asked for advice, although he got their guidance, he never attracted their attention. Even thinking about it now, every professor, whether it was Dumbledore, Flitwick, or even Voldemort, looked at him, as if he were looking at a child playing around. No wonder there is a saying that goes without investigation, there is no right to speak. After he confessed to Penelope's eyes were straight like him, and they looked at each other. Even though Penelope has lived in the wizarding world since she was a child, before she mastered the ability to change her form, her only social option was sending messages through carrier pigeons. Therefore, after learning about Gretel's project, she really sparked curiosity and a sense of mission to change the magical world. Now that they understood the situation, the two concluded that the wizard market was completely over. However, if you want to introduce your products to the Muggle world, you cannot avoid the market access ticket of the International Federation of Wizards and Wizard Secrecy Act. More than a month ago, Pinello might still be worried about gains and losses, and even felt that he had wasted his time. But every time she thought about the categorical rejection she received when she asked Gretel to quit last time, when she felt she was useless, she no longer felt disappointed at all. Then, what are you going to do next? Pinello did not answer, because in the past few days, Gretel had to apologize every time he saw her. She is not worried about anything else now. She is only worried about this junior student who has locked himself in the room of requirement and been autistic for several days, for fear that he will not recover after a fall. She believed in his ability, even more than Grete believed in himself. There must be more than one piece of research in that plan, which was filled with notes from beginning to end. Let's rest for a few days. I don't know where to start at the moment. Gretel didn't feel much loss. After all, it came from the cognitive gap. He needs to adjust, think carefully about the direction of his research, and research something that is truly suitable for wizards. Only when all wizards are inseparable from his research can he completely infiltrate the wizarding world. Only then can most people be coerced into having the International Federation of Wizards cancel the secrecy law and then complete their life plans. Christmas Eve. Gretel packed up his packages early in the morning, and he couldn't wait to go back to the orphanage. As early as a week ago, when Professor Flitwick registered for the school leave list, he couldn't wait to be the first to sign up. Fortunately, he is not homeless, otherwise the rescue team, which is looking at him eagerly and longing for him to stay and investigate McCallum, would definitely drag him on a Christmas adventure. In order to surprise his younger brothers and sisters in the orphanage, he specially begged the seniors who could go to Hogsmeade Village to bring him a lot of candies that could only be found in the wizarding world. Of course, those magical candies that can run, jump, and sing cannot be taken back, otherwise, the Ministry of Magic will come to your door. Even so, candies with various strange flavors still took up half of his suitcase space. The Hogwarts train was ready. At 9 o'clock in the morning, it was confirmed that the little wizards had gathered, and the train left Hogwarts on time. No one in the orphanage knew that Gretel was coming back. Even Mrs. Swan thought that Gretel would spend his first Christmas in the wizarding world at Hogwarts. So, when Grete appeared at the entrance of the orphanage in a dusty state, almost everyone rushed over in surprise. On Christmas Day, Gretel was awakened by owl messengers outside the attic window. The owls were so busy today that they couldn't even wait for Grete to feed them. He threw the gift in his paws in front of him and flew away neatly in the wind and snow. Not many people knew his address, and they could be counted on two hands, but almost everyone who knew his address sent him something. Some were just letters of congratulations, and some were packages large or small. Professor McGonagall gave him a book about the origins of transfiguration. Professor Flitwick's gift was a bottle containing a starry sky, which looked a bit like the one on top of the common room and looked extremely delicate. Senior Pinello sent a raven brooch, and the note in the gift box said that it was a lucky charm she found from Bogustor. Principal Dumbledore sent a golden hollow key and a letter. What surprised Gretel the most was that Snape, who had been frowning all day long, actually sent him a gift. It was a small medicine bottle, which contained a dose of elixir for one person. I've made a lot of the newly prepared feeling elixir. I have time to try its efficacy. Gretel laughed at this arrogant person and carefully put these gifts into his small bag. Then I started opening the letters. There were more letters than gifts, and it looked like it would take him a while to open them. Harry's letter was of little value. it just sent him Christmas wishes and expressed his resentment for not participating in Nicholas Flamel's investigation. Hermione's letter was as direct as hers. While sending her blessings, she hoped that he could recommend some literature he had read to her on was the least wordy, and only send Christmas wishes. He was still worried that Gretel would steal Harry's friendship. Harry, Gretel, and even Hermione could see this. Professor McGonagall hoped that he could study transfiguration. She thought he was very talented. Professor Flitwick hoped that he would be happy and consoled him for his failed research. There was no way the dean had always cared so much about the little wizard, not to mention that Pinello had asked him to help enlighten Gretel. Dumbledore's letter was not long, but it aroused Gretel's interest. Dumbledore said that the gift he gave had a small surprise, but Gretel needed to decrypt it himself. He also said that, if he decrypted it, there would be other surprises for him. After he had packed up everything and answered all the letters that needed to be answered, his Christmas vacation was basically coming to an end. Maybe it was because there were too many letters to reply to, but after delivering the letters, Sebastian didn't even lose his temper and went back to his cage looking exhausted. In the reluctant eyes of a bunch of little guys. Gretel returned to Hogwarts. Terry still looked energetic. He really didn't look like a calm and collected Raven. Again, there must be some bug in the sorting hat. Grete, you don't know what happened on Christmas. You will definitely be happy for me. Our family went to a Quidditch game over the Christmas holidays. The Tuttle Tornadoes, you know. I'm a huge fan of the Tuttle Tornadoes and they will definitely win the Quidditch trophy this year. Terry looked really excited, and it wasn't until Snape gave him a good beating in potions class on Monday that he returned to his usual calm self. I hope none of you lose your brain over the holidays again. If anyone blows up the crucible again, I will definitely make him regret why he didn't change himself into a troll's brain before class. Professor, thank you for your Christmas gift. Gretel placed a set of crystal potion bottles that he specially selected on Snape's desk. That's because you have made too many potions. Also, don't give me this kind of thing. Do I, as a potions professor, lack such a set of potion bottles like you? Grete didn't reply at all and just dealt with the potion materials in his hands with peace of mind. It is easier to extract the juice from sea onion bulbs by cutting them diagonally when squeezing the bile of the mottle rat. The action should be as gentle as possible. The falling fragments will affect the potion configuration. When Gretel left Snape's office, he noticed that the potion bottle that was supposed to be placed in the corner of the desk had been put away at some point. Thanks for the monthly vote from the Harry Potter guys. The dog head saves life. The saviors have come to vote. How can we not write well? You can't look at the data anymore. Once you look at the data, it will affect the status. Write with peace of mind. Sorry, this is the 3000 chapter today, and there will be another 3000 chapter tomorrow. Small theater Voldemort. Gretel, do you want to promote your products to the whole world? Come with me. We, Master and Apprentice, will overthrow the International Federation of Wizards first, and then you can build your business empire to your heart's content. Pinello, I supported. Hermione, I support that. Harry, I don't support working with you, but I support Gretel. Ron, I don't support Voldemort, and I don't support Gretel, but I support Harry. Gretel, a mutiny in Shinkio in the wizarding world. Force me to wear a yellow robe. Sorting hat. Let me tell you, Dumbledore, I don't want you to interfere with the sorting. You have to insist. See, if it weren't for you, he would definitely be sorted into Slytherin by me. Dumbledore, eat my sword of Gryffindor. Chapter 34. The spell is blocked, and the disobedient wand. Professor Dumbledore, I found a dead unicorn in the Forbidden Forest yesterday. Someone killed it. I don't know who killed the poor little guy. When it was born, the unicorns held a ceremony for it. It was a little guy who was full of curiosity about everything. It shouldn't have carried the group on its back and ran to the outside. When I saw it yesterday, all the blood had drained from it. The centaurs have gone crazy. They now prohibit everyone from approaching the Forbidden Forest. If Aragog didn't need my comfort, even I wouldn't be able to enter. One day in late February, Hagrid walked into Dumbledore's office. Dumbledore was stunned for a moment. I understand. Talk to the centaurs and see if you can get them to persuade the unicorns to go deeper into the Forbidden Forest before leaving. Dumbledore reminded Hagrid to protect himself. When Gretel met Dumbledore, it was late at night on the weekend. The Phoenix, which can apparate in Hogwarts, is Dumbledore's best messenger. Late at night, when everyone was sleeping, Fox gently pecked Gretel's head and then handed over a piece of letter. The content of the letter is very short, only one sentence. "I'll wait for you in the headmaster's office. Let Fox bring you here. Filch won't be embarrassed. Albus Dumbledore." Gretel left the tower quietly without attracting anyone's attention. To be honest, after seeing Dumbledore so many times, this was the first time Gretel saw Dumbledore worried. Under the dim light, Dumbledore stood in front of the Pensieve and frowned, not knowing what to think about. Even the sound of Grete pushing the door failed to wake him from his thoughts. The portraits of past principals on the wall were covered with curtains, and Grete could hear the sounds of the portrait sleeping. This was the first time Gretel had seen a portrait sleeping. In the past, he had only heard complaints from young wizards from other colleges that the portrait guarding the gate of his family visited again or fell asleep, forcing them to spend the whole night wandering around. Walking in front of Dumbledore, the silver threads representing thinking and the Pensieve merged into a galaxy, spinning crazily in the basin. The Pensieve was small, wide, flat and hollow. It looked like it was carved from a single piece of stone. It was dotted with many dazzling gems around the basin. Gretel was sure that those gems were inextricably linked to the magic of the Pensieve, because just standing next to the Pensieve, you could feel a powerful magic power. "Gretel, do you know what I'm thinking?" Dumbledore exhaled a long breath. He wasn't waiting for Grete to answer, because he didn't leave any time for Grete to interrupt. "I'm thinking, if I had killed him the first time I met him, there wouldn't have been so many disasters in the wizarding world." Gretel smacked his lips inwardly angrily. Yes, if Dumbledore was really the White Devil with ulterior motives as Voldemort said, he would definitely choose to kill him directly, rather than sit back and watch him grow. After all, for Dumbledore, in those years before Voldemort grew up, he could easily crush him, which was no more difficult than crushing an ant. I remember that in his previous life, he had argued with many people about whether Dumbledore was the White Devil with ulterior motives. For a White Devil, in order to maintain his image as a savior who can turn the tide, it is only reasonable to sit back and watch the growth of the Dark Devil. Gretel had never thought so. After all, Dumbledore's status in the wizarding world was obvious to all. After a generation of Dark Lords stepped down, his status was unshakable. He does not need to do such a thing redundantly. Rather than saying that Voldemort was trained by him, it is better to say that Dumbledore regretted that he failed to properly guide Tom Riddle to the right path. "The first time I saw him, I knew he was a gifted child. At the same time, I also knew that his heart was extremely twisted. Everyone was deceived by him, but I was the only one who stayed vigilant against him." There was regret, and many other emotions in Dumbledore's tone that Gretel couldn't understand. Gretel thought he would let himself see his memories, but Dumbledore waved his hand and closed the Pensieve. The Milky Way swimming in the basin was obscured by a cloud of mist and became inconspicuous again. "He has been awake for at least a week. Hagrid told me that unicorn corpses were found in the Forbidden Forest for several days in a row, and all the blood on them was sucked dry." After the two sat down, Dumbledore's first words surprised Gretel. Since Christmas, he has been going to Quirrell at least twice a week, thinking that when Voldemort wakes up, he will give him the samples he made. But until she came to see Dumbledore today, Gretel had no idea that Voldemort had awakened. Quirrell still had the same unpleasant look, hesitating and stammering, and always telling his old adventure stories in class. "It seems you haven't seen him before." "Yes, I only saw Professor Quirrell, and he never showed up once." "Don't go any further until this matter is over. Just because he didn't hurt you before doesn't mean he won't in the future. I think he has discovered that you are meeting me." Gretel always listened to people's advice. When Dumbledore said that Voldemort had awakened, he no longer planned to meet Quirrell alone. Whatever the reason, Voldemort had shown a clear desire to stay away. Therefore, for the sake of his own life, no matter how greedy he was for Voldemort's knowledge, Gretel would not choose to take risks. Not to mention that, since the last time he realized that his research was on the wrong path due to his misguided Muggle thinking, Gretel has now devoted himself to learning to be a pure wizard. At least, let yourself be able to look at the magical world from a wizard's perspective. Many of the things Voldemort taught him were memorized in detail, and he still needed time to learn in depth. It's still a long time, so he can take his time. Gretel, we know who put the troll in. Before the exam week came, the three little ones came to Grete with serious expressions. It's Snape. He wants to help Voldemort steal the Sorcerer's Stone. In Ron's horrified eyes, Harry said that name. Harry, can you stop saying that name? Ron lowered his voice for fear of drawing attention to himself. We found out that Snape was a Death Eater many years ago and was Voldemort's most trusted subordinate. If Dumbledore hadn't saved him, he would have been imprisoned in Azkaban. I now know why he targeted me everywhere, because Voldemort was back and he wanted to show his loyalty. Harry's face was full of determination, and Ron nodded in agreement. Hermione obviously had different opinions from the two children. Harry, it's definitely not Professor Snape. He's just a bit strict. No way, it must be him. He also locked me up. From the beginning of the school year to now, I have to go to his gloomy office every Friday and listen to him scolding me that my brain is worse than a troll. Harry, that's not confinement. It's obviously teaching you how to brew potions. Didn't you realize that in the current potions class, your level is far superior to everyone else's? Harry was as stubborn as ever and couldn't listen to Hermione's explanation. Grete secretly sighed in his heart. Maybe this was the impact of the first impression. After all, from Harry's perspective, from the first time he and Snape met until now, he has been subjected to cynicism. He never had a good look on his face, even if he followed the textbook and prepared the potion without making a single mistake from beginning to end. Still, he could only get one comment from Snape, saying he was better than the troll. But more often than not, he only gets comments suggesting that he put on a troll head. It seems that in Snape's heart, he will always be inferior to the troll. Faced with the invitation from the three little ones, Gretel refused. Leaving aside the fact that Harry's investigation was in the wrong direction, just talking about Voldemort's guidance during this period. He couldn't do anything to burn bridges. That's not his temperament, and it doesn't even matter to him whether the wizarding world is in chaos or not. He just wants to protect the people important to him. Taking a step back, even if Voldemort really rules the wizarding world, he can take the people important to him, stay away from disputes, and go far away. Salvation is a dangerous road, not only for yourself, but also for other people you cherish. Therefore, he is unwilling and impossible to take this path. After rejecting the three little ones that time, I don't know if I was worried that he would reveal the information to Snape. Harry and the others would never share their information with Gretel again. Grete felt at ease and could study new spells with peace of mind. Ever since the last battle with the troll and finding out that he didn't have any attack spells to take advantage of, Grete started his own research. The best defense is offense, whether it is for muggles or wizards, although his self-created utopia is a strong defensive spell. It does not mean that he can sit back and relax. For now, his utopia is still unable to withstand the powerful black magic represented by the unforgivable curse. In order to ensure that he will not become a living target, he needs at least one powerful offensive spell, one that can give him powerful fire suppression. As long as the enemy he beats can't stand up, he can come and go freely under the protection of utopia. However, the development of offensive spells was not smooth. The core of his wand was made of unicorn hair, which naturally repels black magic. However, the most powerful attack spells are often inextricably linked to black magic. So every time he casts a spell that could cause death or injury, his wand would be a little unruly. In order to develop his own offensive spell as soon as possible, Gretel sent a letter to the Wand Master Ollivander. Ollivander's reply stated that it is not so much that unicorn fur repels dark magic, but rather that magical animals like unicorns are naturally resistant to death. Maybe in the world of unicorns, all spells that can cause death or injury are classified as black magic. Therefore, the magic materials obtained from it also have this characteristic. But there is no need to change the wand, because since ancient times, there have been many wands that can cast black magic, and the core of the wand is unicorn Here 3000 has been added, and there will be 2 chapters later. Small theater Voldemort. It's nothing more than burning bridges. Why didn't you tell me about being a spy for Dumbledore? Gretel, there's nothing I can do about it. I didn't know anything about you at that time. I just knew that you were the Dark Lord. I knew you were actually teaching me sincerely. I thought you had some agenda. Find a protective umbrella that can covet your knowledge and don't have to worry about safety. Only a fool would not do it. Voldemort, now that you know that I'm really good to you, can we discuss it and come with me? Gretel, no, I just want to make money cleanly and I don't want to be a gangster with you. Voldemort, looking back at the Death Eaters, come on, tie him back to me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35. If there is no accident, then there will be an accident. Since changing the wand required going to Diagon Alley, Gretel accepted Ollivander's suggestion. Regular communication with the wand can enhance the spirituality of the wand and make the wand fully compatible with itself. From that day on, Gretel began the long journey of talking to the wand. To be honest, even Ravenclaw, which is full of weirdos, rarely sees such strange situations. A first year little wizard would hold his wand and whisper when he had nothing to do. If it weren't for Gretel's outstanding performance over the past few months, he would have been nicknamed Wand Madman. Even Terry, who was in the same dormitory, cast concerned glances from time to time. He suspected that Grete was worried about the exam and comforted Grete. There is no one in the 4 colleges who studies better than you. There is no need for you to put so much pressure on yourself. If that doesn't work, let's go to Madame Pomfrey's place and listen to the senior teacher saying that she is the best at comforting little wizards who are anxious about exams. Unfortunately, all he received was a blank stare from Gretel. Communicating with the wand day and night, even when sleeping, Gretel would hold the wand and talk in his sleep. I don't know if it was an illusion, but Gretel seemed to really feel the spirituality of the wand that Ollivander mentioned. Although he still loses control from time to time when casting spells related to black magic, the frequency of occurrence is much less than before. Even when casting other ordinary spells, Grete even felt like he could use his fingers with ease. Even during the practical examination of the charms class, Professor Flitwick praised Gretel's extremely smooth control of spells on the day the exams ended. All the houses, including Ravenclaw, were relieved of the burden of the exam week. After a long absence, the eaglets of Ravenclaw no longer continued to curl up and left the tower and library one by one, choosing to go to various places in Hogwarts to bask in the sun. At the turn of spring and summer, the coldness and humidity of the Black Lake faded away. Under the sunshine, the water in the shallow water even felt warm to the touch. It must be said that the scenery of Hogwarts is beautiful. From a distance, the Black Lake looks like a black natural crystal, sparkling in the sunlight. When you get closer, you will find that the lake water in most places is almost transparent. The black color is because the lake water is too transparent and you can see the fat lake mud at the bottom of the lake. Standing by the shallow water of the Black Lake, you can see a huge squid lying lazily in the water, basking in its belly, that has never seen the sun all year round. Some courageous senior wizards still naughtily formed a few water balls and threw them on the giant squid. The giant squid didn't mind either. Only when the water balloons of the little wizards accidentally hit its eyes, it flicked its tentacles in dissatisfaction and spit out a bunch of bubbles from its mouth. There are rumors that this giant squid may be Godric Gryffindor, the founder of Gryffindor, because it is said that Godric Gryffindor's animagus is a squid. There are also rumors that Godric was cursed by the blood curse. As the curse deepened, he slowly lost consciousness and eventually became an ordinary squid. But after all, no one can prove that Hogwarts doesn't even ban wizards from making fun of it. So this story is just a story. Across the shallow water, if you have a good view, you can see the mermaids on the bottom, who are also celebrating the sunshine. Although they are not as beautiful as the legendary mermaids, they do not have beautiful singing voices or graceful bodies. However, their figures are really strong and their sense of strength as they shuttle through the water has a different kind of beauty. Farther away in the sunny place, there are many people lying comfortably on the lawn, enjoying the warm sunshine like the giant squid. Regardless of grade, everyone is enjoying the week before the results come out. When Terry and Grete arrived, there was no good location on the edge of the Black Lake. They had no choice but to go up the short slope. In the distance, I seemed to see Harry Potter of Gryffindor, the savior. As soon as they reached the top of the short slope and found their position, Terry tugged on Gretel's clothes. It seems they haven't found a place to relax. Do you need me to say hello to them? Let's bask in the sun together. He knew that these little lions had a good relationship with Gretel. No, it's not necessary. Gretel glanced at Harry and they were heading towards Hagrid's hut. No need. We will dry it ourselves. They will find their own place. Of course Gretel knew that the savior team was about to start their adventure. Gretel was like an outsider, silently watching them run to Hagrid's hut. He hurried back to the castle. Gryffindors are really full of energy, unlike us. After taking exams for so long, it feels like they have shed a layer of skin. Obviously, Terry was also observing the savior team and murmured. Grete almost laughed, but luckily he held it back. If he wasn't afraid of hitting Terry, he really wanted to tell him, no, in the entire Ravenclaws, you are the only one who feels like you have lost a layer of skin. You are just a lion wearing an eagle skin. Terry never worked hard on subjects that he was not interested in, which resulted in Terry inevitably scratching his head during the potions exam, the transfiguration exam, and the astronomy exam. But his paper grades shouldn't be too bad. Endorsement has always been the easiest thing for a Ravenclaw. Even for Terry, this is true. In the practical examination of potions, because of Gretel's influence, although there were many mistakes, it was not a big problem. At least he could pass the practical exam. For transfiguration was not so good. The snuff bottle he conjured up even had two beards, and Professor McGonagall deducted a lot of points. There was also a mistake in the execution of the spell, and his pineapple fell and rolled out of the desk while tap dancing. Fortunately, Dean Flitwick encouraged him and asked him to do it again. Normally, he shouldn't be given a too low score. After all, these scores are meant to be shown to parents during the holidays. If his grades are too bad, Terry probably won't have a very comfortable holiday. Dean Flitwick would never do anything too cruel to a young wizard. In this kind of weather, you can't stay in the sun for too long, otherwise you will feel dizzy. If it weren't for the pressure brought by this exam week, there wouldn't be so many people coming out to bask in the sun. They want to escape from this stressful castle. From the moment the exam ended, all the little wizards were waiting for the holiday with excitement and apprehension. The excitement is that the holidays are finally here and they will have a month's long break. The worry is that if their results after 1 week are not satisfactory, their long vacation will become like going to jail. If nothing else goes wrong, Grete, who has also let go of the stress of exam week, should have an unusually comfortable sleep. Until the rising sun shines through the window and onto his face. But unfortunately, at this time, some strange accidents often occur. There is one more chapter. It will be a bit late. Book friends, go to bed first and read it again tomorrow morning. I wish you all sweet dreams and good night. Small theater Grete, I make a wish that everything will be fine tonight and that spring will still bloom tomorrow morning. Harry, Ron, Hermione, I disagree. Voldemort, I don't agree either. Gretel, Chapter 36 Attacked by Leo Fui. Gretel never expected that it wasn't the sun that woke him up, or even his room at rather, it was a mixture of steam and shadow. In Grete's surprised eyes, a face formed on the mixture of steam and shadow. Gretel was confused. He couldn't figure out why it was Voldemort who woke him up. Looking out the window, the night is dark and the sun shows no sign of rising. Gretel really couldn't understand why he had summoned this Dark Lord, even though he was already far away from the rescue team. At this time, shouldn't he escape from Hogwarts as soon as possible? Gretel didn't even try to shout for attention. He didn't want to anger the Dark Lord in front of him. It seemed that The Dark Lord had failed after all, at the hands of the prophesied natural enemy. His expression was one of unwillingness to have his purpose destroyed, and he even looked a little angry. But it was obvious that he showed restraint in front of Gretel. Shh. Voldemort put down his finger that was about to cast the silencing spell, and just made a silencing movement on his lips to avoid interrupting our conversation. Then, pass out. Grete noticed his roommates, who should have been asleep, tilted his head and successfully fell into a deeper sleep. Gretel, you should know who I am, right? Voldemort's tone was quite certain. Yes, Professor. Grete had no intention of deceiving. After all, although Voldemort's eyes were full of madness, there was no desire for destruction in his eyes. Sure enough, you already knew it was not Gretel who was talking to you. Yes, Professor, I always knew. You're doing eyeliner for Dumbledore, right? Gretel was silent. After all, being a spy was not a good thing, and Voldemort had not harmed him. I know you are acting as an informant for Dumbledore, but I don't care. I know my reputation. It's normal for you to be wary. Actually, I didn't have high hopes, especially after seeing so many levels that Dumbledore had laid out. I knew that this was a trap set by Dumbledore for me. He has always been so arrogant, ever since he first met me. If I'm the visible Dark Lord of the wizarding world, then Dumbledore is the invisible White Lord that envelopes the entire wizarding world. You don't have to deny it. Neither I nor the people at the Ministry of Magic think so. Even when I was at the height of my power, they imagined that I could overthrow him. Gretel, come with me. I'm better suited to teach you than Dumbledore. I can make you as great a wizard as I have ever been. Come with me and everything I have will be yours. The entire magical world will tremble beneath your feet. Voldemort's expression was frantic, and there was a hint of hope in his eyes. Gretel really couldn't figure out what attracted Voldemort to him, and why he was worth taking such a big risk and going to the tower to abduct him while escaping. If it weren't for the fear of igniting this powder keg that obviously restrained him, Grete would really want to ask his questions. What is it about me that attracts you? Can't I change it? I don't know if it was Gretel's hesitation that made this remnant soul feel deceived, and impatience finally began to appear in his eyes. The people at Hogwarts are still saving their savior even now. But it won't be long before the entire Hogwarts will be investigated, and he really doesn't have much time. There was no more time for Gretel to think about it. Realizing this, Voldemort finally decided to use violence. Imperio. The light of the Imperious curse emitted from his fingers and shot straight to Gretel's head. Voldemort's eyes were full of expectation. He was looking forward to snatching such a genius from Hogwarts and from Dumbledore's hands. As long as the Imperious curse is in effect, he can take Gretel away without any scruples. As for the future, he believed that people like Gretel would eventually convince him to become a good student of his. What Voldemort couldn't figure out was that his Imperious curse was actually blocked by a magic shield that suddenly appeared when he was approaching Gretel. Professor, you don't have to be like this. I don't care what other people call you, the Dark Lord. No matter how cruel you are to others, you haven't hurt me, right? Grete's eyes were full of calmness, not even affected by Voldemort's sudden release of the Imperious curse. I thank you for imparting your knowledge to me selflessly, but it is really bad that you intend to take me away by force like this, and it will greatly reduce your impression. Ever since Dumbledore told him, Voldemort had awakened, but had not chosen to appear in front of him again. He has been wearing the school badge given to him by Professor McGonagall. Even when sleeping, he would deliberately take off the school badge from his coat and wear it solemnly on his chest. Even while taking a shower, Gretel did not give up holding the school badge in his hand, just to guard against such a sudden attack. Professor, this school badge can last for at least 5 minutes if you are not willing to use a death curse on me. According to Professor Flitwick, except for the death curse, it is impossible for other black magic to break through this magic shield within 5 minutes. It is impossible to say that Gretel is not afraid of Voldemort's death curse. Even for his utopia, it is only theoretically possible to resist the big melons, and he still needs to make utopia to the top. This instant death curse comes from the wizard's will, just like the transfiguration spell, and it doesn't make sense at all. He was betting that Voldemort would not do this. At least judging from the attitude of the two of them getting along, Voldemort admired him extremely. Also, the moment this spell is triggered within the scope of Hogwarts, the caster bound to the skull badge will be notified immediately. If Professor McGonagall didn't lie to me, they should be rushing here now. Voldemort smiled, and at this moment, he even suppressed the madness caused by tearing his soul too many times. You are indeed very confident. I will not cast a death curse on you. However, Gretel, believe me, you cannot escape. You will definitely become my student. In Gretel's disbelieving eyes, Voldemort turned into a mixture of steam and shadow again. He easily squeezed into the magic shield that Professor Flitwick was patting his chest on. Although, I can't take you with me to teach me now. You don't want to be idle either. Gretel watched with his own eyes as Voldemort tore off a bunch of edges from his vapor mixture and slapped him on the head. He only had time to lean to the side, and the grey mist hit his neck. The moment before losing consciousness, Gretel saw Voldemort passing through the window of the tower with a happy face and flying into the distant night. He only had time to take a breath before falling into darkness. The third update is here. Good night, all book lovers, and thank you for your recommendation votes. Small theater Voldemort, akimbo, Dumbledore, look, my students must be more powerful than yours. Dumbledore, Tom, don't forget, he was a student at Hogwarts first, and then you came into contact with him. Sooner or later, you will be your brother Voldemort, but his body has been engraved with my marks. What else does Hogwarts have besides a diploma? You're 100 years old. Dumbledore, you are also an old man in your 60s. Do you still think you are young? The two of them had a verbal spat. Gretel, rubbing his neck vigorously, Professor, please make it clear. What you are giving me is knowledge, not nonsense. If you continue to talk nonsense, I will eat it. Chapter 37 Gifts and Keys. I don't know what it feels like for others to be in a coma. Gretel felt as if he was drowning, and the darkness like the deep sea enveloped his consciousness, but in this void of darkness, there was something annoying nagging into his ears. Grete swore that, if it weren't for the darkness that sealed his hands and feet, he would have let this nagging guy taste his power. Albus, Kit, forget it. I just want to ask, when do you think little Gretel will wake up, Professor? Flitwick stepped on a chair and leaned forward to observe the unconscious Gretel. He was a little scared. Who would have thought that the mysterious man would attack a first-year wizard while running for his life? Dumbledore pushed the frame of the glasses that slid down the bridge of his nose, considered it. Phileas, don't worry, the castle told me that the child's life is not in danger. Flitwick stood up straight and looked at Dumbledore seriously. Albus, have you known for a long time that the mysterious man is possessing Quirrell? I now understand that if we really need to protect the magic stone, we can only rely on those few levels that are not too difficult. So, all you are doing is setting a trap for that person. Yes, I know he sneaked into Hogwarts. I discovered him when I met Quirrell for the second time. Then, how dare you let him in? There are so many little wizards here. What if he goes on a killing spree? Don't you know what kind of person he is? To be honest, Dumbledore had never seen Flitwick so angry. In his impression, Phileas Flitwick was always smiling. Phileas, he is back. We need to find his weakness as soon as possible before he can regain his power. You don't want the wizarding world to go back to the time when it was surrounded by Death Eaters. This may be the only opportunity in this life to study him up close. If we miss it, we may never find a way to eliminate him. I kept my eyes on him, and he had no chance of hurting anyone under my eyes, Dumbledore said with determination in his eyes. It turns out we found it, right? Dumbledore looked at Harry, who was almost buried in gifts on the hospital bed on the other side. I saw with my own eyes that when Voldemort grabbed Harry with Quirrell's body, he was in just as much pain as Harry. No, he should be in much more pain than Harry. Flitwick's anger did not diminish much because of Dumbledore's explanation. In his opinion, as long as they were in Hogwarts, professors had the obligation to protect every little wizard. Instead of risking the little wizard like now, even for the future. Of course, what he couldn't accept especially was that Gretel was also attacked. If he had known that the mysterious man was behind Quirrell, he would never have agreed to Gretel going to Quirrell for advice, even with Dumbledore's guarantee. Dumbledore never told him that Gretel actually became a spy for the mysterious man. Yes, there will be no accidents under your nose. But didn't you still get transferred by a letter? See for yourself. There are 2 wizards lying here. 2 first-year wizards who have just entered school. Aren't you afraid that, if the news gets out, the school directors will impeach you as principal? You know, they've long since stopped wanting you to dominate Hogwarts. Albus, you have changed. Flitwick didn't say anything else. He jumped out of his chair a little lonely and left without saying a word. Dumbledore stood still, looking at the 2 hospital beds in front of him. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. Grete was very lucky that when he opened his first eyes, he saw the whiteness that represented the infirmary. Not the imaginary coffin or prison cell. Sitting up, he saw many bouquets, fruits, and other gifts suitable for patients placed beside his bed. A few steps away, on another hospital bed, lay a pale Harry, almost buried in various gifts. It seems that the deeds of the savior have spread. Grete thought to himself. Just as he was about to get out of bed, Madame Pomfrey walked in. My Merlin, lie down quickly. You cannot get out of bed before you have been examined. Madame Pomfrey has always cared so much about patients. Throughout the semester, Gretel has heard about it many times, but this is the first time he has seen it with his own eyes. He also heard that Madame Pomfrey forbade anyone to disturb the patients, otherwise the visitors would be kicked out. Soon, Gretel saw Madame Pomfrey's unwelcome attitude toward visitors through a door. Gretel heard Terry fawning over Madame Pomfrey in order to get a few minutes of visiting time. Look, I said you can come in this way, Terry showed off to Pinello as he pushed the door open. When they came in, Gretel was leaning on the bedside, reading notes. Seeing Gretel wake up, Terry looked surprised. Merlin, do you know that you saved a life from the Dark Lord? Gretel rolled his eyes at him angrily, thinking, you must know that you are the one who saved his life from the Dark Lord. God knows how panicked Gretel was when she saw Voldemort casting a spell on his room. He was 80% sure that Voldemort would not kill him, but he had no confidence that Voldemort would not take action against his room. From Terry's chattering mouth, Gretel knew what happened after he fell into coma. The professors rushed to the tower collectively and saw that no one in the dormitory was moving. They thought something tragic had happened. Fortunately, Dean Flitwick realized that they were under a coma spell and woke them all up with a final ending. Gretel was not in a good condition at the time. He had a high fever, almost as if he was about to burn. He was sent to Madame Pomfrey overnight to stabilize the situation. Everyone speculates that Voldemort came to silence you because he was afraid that you would grow up. Fortunately, the professors came in time. Grete wanted to say that Terry was overthinking and that Voldemort was not only not afraid of me growing up, but also expected me to grow up quickly. Because his panel has told him clearly. There is clearly one more entry in the talent column. Gift, a soul gift from another powerful wizard. With the growth of magic power, the sealed knowledge is released. Of course, the gift of fate often contains its price, and your whereabouts will no longer be a secret to the giver. In order to get rid of the GPS given by Professor Tom, Grete felt that he needed to find his parents again. After getting Madame Pomfrey's consent, Gretel rushed to the principal's office without stopping. Headmaster Dumbledore, Headmaster Flitwick, that's it. Gretel recounted in detail what happened before he fell into coma, and then blinked innocent eyes at the 2 professors in front of him. Facts have proved that not everyone can master black magic. The 2 people struggled for a long time and finally came to the unified conclusion that this was a very profound soul magic that no one could remove unless Voldemort himself was willing. Just when the 2 were at a loss what to do, Dumbledore seemed to have thought of something. Grete, do you remember the Christmas gift I gave you? That key you said I had a surprise in decrypting? Yes, that's it. The 2 of them seemed to be playing charades, with only Professor Flitwick looking confused. Of course, I've always had it with me, but I haven't gotten around to studying it yet. Gretel took out the golden hollow key from his bag and placed it on the table in front of him. I owe 1 chapter today and will make up 3,000 tomorrow. I'm in a daze and feel like I'm about to faint. Thank you to all the book lovers for your recommendation votes and support. Good night. See you tomorrow. Small Theatre Flitwick. Albus, if you take risks with young wizards again, I will unite with the school governors to impeach you. Dumbledore. Filius, as long as you can kill Tom, you can take my life. Flitwick. Melon. Albus, you are crazy. Really. Gretel, don't worry. No one who doesn't deserve to die will die. I'm just here to make up for my regrets. Chapter 38 Year-End Dinner. Professor Flitwick picked up the key, looked at it, and said tentatively, "Portkey." Dumbledore glanced at Gretel with his blue eyes, and nodded silently. Gretel didn't understand why Dumbledore gave him a portkey. Where is the other end of the portkey? Nermingard, Azkaban, the cell he didn't see when he woke up is waiting in the near future, right? Obviously, Dumbledore didn't intend to give him a chance to think blindly. This key leads to Dorset. I have an old friend who lives there. I think Gretel can go to him to expand his wizarding horizons. As he spoke, Dumbledore took the key from Flitwick and lifted the sealing spell covering the key. I thought that before the 3rd grade, you could unlock the sealing spell on the key by yourself and go to Newt's place to see magical animals. Believe me, you will love it. There are few people who can't be interested in Newt's magical animals. It is different from the door keys that wizards hide in various places in nature to avoid attracting the attention of muggles as much as possible. Without the seal of the curse, the originally golden door key given by Dumbledore became gleaming, and every inch of light showed its extraordinariness. Newt Scamander, I remember him, the master of fantastic beasts. You said many times that it was because of his help that you were able to imprison Grindelwald. Flitwick's words made Dumbledore look slightly embarrassed. He rubbed his nose, pushed up his glasses, and turned to talk about Voldemort. Dumbledore said that he knew Voldemort, and as long as it was something Voldemort wanted, he would get it, no matter what the cost. The soul charm around Gretel's neck was for positioning, so that the Death Eaters controlled by Voldemort could help him kidnap people. When talking about the Death Eaters, Dumbledore's eyes were full of disgust. He said that these guys were like the endless cockroaches in the sewer in this case. In order to ensure Grete's safety and freedom, there are only 2 methods available. The first is to ask him to apply to stay in school during the holidays. As long as he is in Hogwarts, no matter how many Death Eaters come, they will not be able to capture him. Not to mention that there are still professors on duty at the school. As long as he didn't leave the actual control of Hogwarts during the holidays, he didn't have to worry about his safety and freedom. No one can kidnap people in Hogwarts, not even Tom. When Dumbledore said this, his tone was full of confidence. The second is to change the location of the portkey to America. Newt Scamander is currently on vacation there and will not return to Dorset until next year. As long as Gretel goes to America, Newt will definitely ensure his safety. When he comes back when school starts, it can be said to be foolproof. Besides, when you get to America, you don't have to worry about Death Eaters. Voldemort's hand can't reach that far. In other words, he can see which professor is available during the holidays, or temporarily stay at the professor's house. Most Death Eaters don't have the ability to steal people from the few main professors at Hogwarts. There were still a few days before the holiday, and Dumbledore asked him to take advantage of these few days to think about it. He stayed at school until the official day of the holiday, asking Grete to come to the principal's office to tell him. After he thought about it, Gretel certainly didn't want to be under house arrest and just stay in Hogwarts for the entire holiday. He originally planned to take advantage of this holiday to investigate the urgent needs of wizards, so that he could restart his research next semester. Of the 2 remaining options, of course the first choice would be to hug each professor's lap. Newt's thighs are also very thick, but after all, he is not familiar with them, so it is easier to pick up the wool of an acquaintance. But after asking around, I couldn't get it. Because Professor Flitwick is a half goblin, he has to go back to the goblin colony every year during the holidays. But goblins have always rejected wizards, and Flitwick said that if Gretel didn't mind staying in his hut every day, he would be happy to spend this holiday with Gretel. After declining, Grete found other professors who had the ability to protect themselves, but it is a pity that Professor Snape and Professor McGonagall have to rotate school guarding at Hogwarts, and Professor Sprout has to go to an ancient jungle to find a magical plant point. After searching in vain, Gretel found Dumbledore and told him his choice point. It was impossible for him to bring danger to the orphanage, so he wrote a letter to Mrs. Swan saying that he would go to America to study for a period of time. When Dumbledore returned the modified portkey to Gretel, Harry also obtained a compromise from Madame Pomfrey and was able to attend Hogwarts and a dinner. The most excited person in the entire auditorium is undoubtedly Ravenclaw, who has always been independent from the world, especially the 7th grade graduates this year in their current state. Gretel really couldn't get them to have anything to do with Ravenclaw. Who would have thought that Ravenclaw could have such a crazy side. Even Terry, who was usually the least Ravenclaw-like, was as calm as the silent black lake outside the castle in front of this group of 7th year seniors. The entire auditorium was decorated with blue and bronze colors representing Ravenclaw, and a huge banner representing Ravenclaw hung on the wall behind the podium. Of course, few people will have droopy faces at the year-end dinner except for Slytherin. Slytherin students from the 1st to 7th grade all looked at their dean with a grumble. There was no way Ravenclaw could win first place, and a large part of the credit should be attributed to Gretel. Who let Quirrell, who was parasitized by the mysterious man, and Severus Snape, the only professor of potions known for his harshness, and the dean of Slytherin, give this first year freshman crazy extra points in his class so much so that at the end of the semester, Ravenclaw's score was even 48 points higher than Slytherin's. 472 points. Ravenclaw's Quidditch results are not outstanding, at least much less than Slytherin's scores, but even so, the final score of the College Cup still showed a crushing posture. Of course, Snape has been coaching for many years and has seen all kinds of scenes, but he is expressionless. Even Gretel can see his dissatisfaction from Snape's cold eyes when he looks at the little snake in Slytherin. Gretel could even simulate his inner thoughts. If your brains weren't as excellent as those of a troll, you would have gotten more bonus points from me. Everyone except Slytherin congratulated Ravenclaw for preventing Slytherin from winning the House Cup for 7 consecutive years, after seeing the expressions of the entire Slytherin snake, as if it had swallowed a whole watermelon. In the entire hall, the degree of happiness of the Gryffindor graduates even caught up with the graduates of Ravenclaw. Their class had been suppressed by Slytherin for 7 whole years, and everyone even dreamed of getting a vote for Slytherin. They had originally planned to give up. The other 6 grades had lived together for 6 years, and they had a clear understanding of the level of their respective colleges. Who would have thought that this year, starting from the 2nd week of formal classes, Ravenclaw gave them such a big surprise, and this surprise even came from a first year wizard. Bonus points. Continuous bonus points. Even after Voldemort borrowed Quirrell's body to coach, Ravenclaw's score was far ahead of the others. In the past years, no matter which college, first year students have always been the ones who drag their seniors down. Not familiar with the rules and regulations, breaking the rules, deductions being caught for night outings, deductions being targeted by Filch, deductions. It can be said that there are all kinds of things that can deduct points for young wizards, and there are few who can bring honor to their college. In the first year Gretel did it, and he became a well-deserved hero of the 3 colleges. Everyone cast a thankful look at him. Of course, except for Slytherin. There are even people who cast their eyes on him with disgust and anger. Gretel doesn't care, Ravenclaw doesn't care, and the other colleges don't care even more. This eager atmosphere continued until the great savior, the hero who once again thwarted the conspiracy of the mysterious man, Harry Potter, appeared. When Harry walked in, the whole hall fell into silence. It was completely silent until Harry sat down, and then the atmosphere became lively again. Everyone's eyes were all away from Gretel, and they were all looking at the rising star of the magic world. Ever since that time, when Gryffindor lost a lot of points, Harry hadn't enjoyed everyone's enthusiasm for a long time. This heroic performance made Harry regain the long-lost enthusiasm of Gryffindor, even more than the beginning of the school year, although Harry had expected it when he woke up and saw the gifts on the bed. He was still a little flattered. The Weasley twin brothers winked at Harry, and they regretted the toilet seat they gave, which was confiscated by Madame Pomfrey. That was a special gift that the two of them had been thinking about for a long time. Another year has passed. Dumbledore stood up happily. Before you enjoy these delicious dishes, I must trouble everyone to listen to the clichés of an old man like me. No one cared about Dumbledore's annual year-end summary. They were only looking forward to ending this ceremony quickly. The delicious dishes in front of them did not allow them to think. Until now, we will hold the award ceremony for the College Cup. The specific scores of each college are as follows. 4th place, Gryffindor, 312 points. 3rd place, Hufflepuff, 352 points. 2nd place, Slytherin, 472 points. 1st place, Ravenclaw, 520 points. With the announcement of the scores, the whole restaurant cheered again, and Slytherin looked at the celebrations of the other 3 colleges with an ugly face. They just felt that it was noisy here. Slytherin just wanted to quickly end this ceremony that they thought was beautiful in previous years, but seemed particularly annoying this year. Fill their stomachs and go to bed quickly. Yes, Ravenclaw's performance this year is particularly outstanding. Dumbledore pressed his palm. But, however, several recent events must also be taken into account. 3000 has been added. 2 updates today will be later. Small theater. All Slytherins. The joys and sorrows of Hogwarts are not connected. I just think they are noisy. All Gryffindors. Someone is jealous, but I won't say who it is. All Hufflepuffs. +1 point. All Ravenclaws. Chapter 39 College Cup. I still have some other points to distribute here. Dumbledore's words suddenly made all 4 houses worried. The entire auditorium fell silent instantly. The Ravenclaw graduates clenched their fists tightly, and their palms were sweating nervously. The first item, Mr. Ron Weasley. Ron became excited all of a sudden, and his whole face flushed red, making people worried that he would not be able to breathe and faint. He won the most exciting game of Wizard's chess at Hogwarts in many years, and I award Gryffindor 50 points for that. Gryffindor. Cheers suddenly swept the entire auditorium, and Percy proudly introduced his brother to the other prefects. Yes, this is my brother, the youngest brother. The Weasley twins also looked proud without hitting Ron for the first time in a long time. They proudly stood on the stools and performed funny acrobatics as Dumbledore gave Gryffindor points. Everyone in Ravenclaw became nervous, except Gretel. Although whoever ended Slytherin was happy, no one was willing to give up this honor, especially watching the cooked duck fly away is really painful. Many little snakes in Slytherin rolled their eyes at this time. Although it is indeed a pity that they lost the Academy Cup, that they won again. However, it is undoubtedly more frustrating if someone loses something that is about to be in his pocket and within easy reach. Even at this time, many little snakes were already shouting in their hearts, Dumbledore, well done, more points. Even though Ravenclaw is among the other 3 houses, relatively speaking, the relationship with them is better. Even if Gryffindor is the least likely to deal with them. It doesn't matter. They just want to see someone miss out on something they have at their fingertips. The pain will not diminish. But once you compare it with something worse, you will feel that your pain is not unacceptable. Our noble Slytherin is like this. Gretel, who had always seemed to be staying out of the situation, was secretly making up conversations for the Slytherin snakes compared to the excited Gryffindors, the nervous Ravenclaws, and the secretly encouraging Slytherins. The calmest ones were the melon-eating badgers who stayed out of the incident. Their attention has been attracted by the fragrant ham, steak, and roast chicken in front of them, and they just want to end it quickly so that they can feast. At the bottom, the little badgers don't care at all. They only care that the roast chicken in front of them can cool down slower, and it is best to keep their crispy skin for a while. Gretel couldn't help but remain calm. After all, he had known that this would happen. The persona of the savior needs to be established, and it needs to be established many times and firmly. In the wizarding world, filled with willpower, the savior must be allowed to fully believe in himself. The true savior is the one who completely believes in one's own savior. The second item, Miss Hermione Granger. She faced the fire. For this, I will award 50 points to Gryffindor. Hermione buried herself in her arms, and Miss Otter cried at the enthusiasm of the people around her. She had never felt this kind of enthusiasm since entering Gryffindor except for Harry and Ron. Almost no one wants to play with her, even though she has lost her arrogance point. But at this moment, everything was settled, and the people around her embraced her, giving her the warmth she deserved. Point in Gryffindor's ecstatic eyes, in Slytherin's secret joy of extra points, in Ravenclaw's nervousness about to swallow his fist. Dumbledore spoke again. The third item, Harry Potter, for his fearless courage and extraordinary courage, Gretel, complained in his heart. He knew that Dumbledore wanted to show the specialness of the savior, but there is no need to secretly add a loud-sounding curse to yourself and deliberately slow down the tone. It is really biased. Hermione and Ron did not enjoy this treatment. He didn't know how many points Dumbledore was going to give Gryffindor, but at least 100 should be added to the savior to catch up with Ravenclaw. For this, I would also like to award Gryffindor 60 points. Gretel was confused and didn't know what old man Dumbledore was playing. 60 points. Even if you include the 10 points planned for Neville, there is still a long way to go compared to their Ravenclaws. It can't end at the end point. Even if you are selfish, you can't give Neville 50 points. Gretel promised that if Dumbledore gave Neville 50 points, the entire auditorium would be blown up by everyone in the 4 houses, including Slytherin. But obviously, no one realized the problem. Ravenclaw was no longer nervous. Slytherin seemed to have been pulled out of the last life-saving straw, and the entire academy fell into a decadent atmosphere. Only Gryffindor was still in high spirits for the first time in many years. They were on par with Slytherin. Dumbledore added a full 160 points to Gryffindor, which made their Academy Cup score soar to third place alongside Slytherin. 2 point. Everyone in Gryffindor looked at Dumbledore eagerly. They wished that Dumbledore would give them another point, just 1 point, as long as he can step on Slytherin's head. Even if he doesn't win the Academy Cup in the end, it can be regarded as a double happiness. On the contrary, Slytherin, who also realized this, finally became nervous, even more nervous than Ravenclaw before. Losing the Academy Cup would have been a shame. If they were stepped on by Gryffindor again, they wouldn't dare think about the misery they would face in the next year. You will be humiliated. You will. Just like when they humiliated Gryffindor. All Slytherin students have never been as pious as they are now, praying to all the gods they can think of, no matter which religion or belief they are. Don't give any more points, not even a single point. A tie is still acceptable, but being stepped on is absolutely unacceptable. Unfortunately, Dumbledore appreciated Neville Longbottom's courage to stand up for himself, and gave him 10 points, completely sinking Slytherin into the Black Lake. To the roar of Gryffindor's explosion of cheers and stomps, Dumbledore announced the final winner of the House Cup, Ravenclaw. This was completely beyond Gretel's expectations. Even when he saw a group of professors shaking hands with Dean Flitwick on the stage to celebrate, his face was filled with astonishment. So much so that when Terry pulled him up and jumped to celebrate, he looked like a brainless doll. He didn't notice at all that a gleam flashed in the blue eyes under his glasses of an old man who had already started eating. I don't know which senior, after the professor left, took out the pure wheat juice he brought back from Hogsmeade behind the back of the professors. Anyway, Grete only vaguely remembered that he seemed to be dancing on the table with someone else in the end. The next day, I woke up with the sun shining on my face. Grete swore that as a research talent, he would never drink gold soda or pure wheat juice again. As for everything that happened last night, it was all just a dream. Suddenly idle, the entire Hogwarts fell into a lazy atmosphere. Everyone was partying and having fun endlessly. Even Slytherin, who lost the House Cup. Of course, during this period, Gryffindor's grimace was inevitable. No matter where they met, as long as Gryffindor shouted 472, Slytherin would hide his face and walk away. Even on the day when the results came out, the Gryffindors were enjoying playing with this new thing. Grete, I will definitely surpass you next school year. Hermione, who won second place in her grade, clenched her fists hard and swore fiercely, goodbye, and have a nice holiday. There is one more chapter. It will be later. Dear book friends, go to bed early and read again tomorrow. Good night. Point small theater. Harry, guilty. Did you get targeted by Voldemort? Because you were too close to me. Gretel, Harry, you think too much. Unlike you, he just wants me to be a student. Point Ron, rubbing his hands. Grete, although I don't like you very much, I hope you are safe. If you are bored and need someone to talk to, you can write to me, and I will drive my dad's car to the school to play with you. Gretel, surprised. Okay, thank you Ron. I won't take away Harry's friendship. You are the best friends. Hermione, Gretel, please be safe. Don't be killed by the mysterious man before I surpass you. Point Gretel, speechless. Chapter 40. Professor Tom, I will definitely repay you. Everyone who knew Gretel blessed him when they said goodbye to him, but there was pity in their eyes. Just as the secret of the savior spreads like wildfire, word spreads to the uninformed. Point the fact that he was targeted by the mysterious man became common knowledge at Hogwarts. Everyone knew that because of being targeted by the mysterious man, Gretel had no choice but to stay in school alone until they started school. Point Terra's grades turned out to be surprisingly good, which meant he had a good vacation. Point, but for the sake of friendship, he even proposed to Gretel to spend the holidays with him at Hogwarts, only to be rejected by Gretel. He patted his chest and promised, "Don't worry, I won't miss home. I really intend to stay with you." It wasn't until Gretel repeatedly refused, saying that he had other arrangements for the holiday, that Terry reluctantly gave up his idea. Point, in order to avoid Death Eaters attacking on the train. He was also worried that other young wizards would be in danger, so Gretel did not leave Hogwarts with the large army. Point after everyone leaves, Professor Flitwick will escort him out of Hogwarts until watching him leave with the portkey. Gretel, the time has come. Let's get ready to go, Professor. Flitwick looked at the time and took Gretel to the open space in front of the castle. Point in Gretel's shocked eyes, Professor Flitwick took out his transportation device. Point Gretel never expected that what Professor Flitwick took out from the package of the traceless extension spell was actually an airship. Point he had known that the experience of operating was similar to that of a wizard bus, which was not very good. Point therefore, if it were not for the rush of time, every wizard would have his own car. The choice for most people is the broomstick. Point Professor Flitwick's figure obviously does not fit in with the current mainstream flying broomsticks. Like all people who don't like flying broomsticks, he also modified his own vehicle. Point the airship grew in length when exposed to the wind and did not stop expanding until it became the size of a room. Point the whole body is fusiform. Unlike the Muggle airships, Professor Flitwick's car does not have airbags. Let's go and show you my airship, Professor. Flitwick was full of pride. This was a technology that belonged to the time when the Goblin Kingdom had not been defeated by wizards. It is almost extinct now, and it took many years of transformation to become what it is now. Point entering the airship, Grete realized that it was not that the airship did not have a gondola, but that it had no airbags. In other words, because of the flying spell, the airbag itself becomes a hanging basket. Point the interior of the airship is divided into 3 parts. The first part is the cockpit in the front cabin. Point I don't know if it was influenced by the steam era in the past, but there are rows of joysticks in the cab. Point however, according to Professor Flitwick, those operating levers have no effect and are mainly guided by the driver's magic and consciousness. Behind the cockpit is the lounge. Point a small bed, a dining table, and sofas surrounding the dining table are all fixed to the deck at the feet. Point the rear of the airship is the storage room of this vehicle. Pointed Professor Flitwick's signal. Gretchen opened the small door at the end. Point he could confirm at a glance that this storage room was definitely under a traceless stretching spell. Several shelves were full of all kinds of food. Point many of them belonged to Professor Flitwick's collection. Point on the most conspicuous shelf at the entrance was the small cake that Gretel was familiar with and used by Professor Flitwick to comfort the little wizards. Although he didn't go in, Grete could still smell the smell of wheat juice wafting from the bottom of the tail cabin. Point he had known that Professor Flitwick loved to drink, and there were several bottles on the bookshelf in his office. Point besides, there are some adult wizards who don't like drinking. Point even Snape, who had a serious face and a serious smile, once guided Gretel in preparing potions while smelling of alcohol. Point his state was really a bit shocking. Point in order to seal the deal, Snape even acquiesced to Gretel and took away from him 2 bottles of hiccup potion that he had finally prepared. Point you know, That is an excellent potion for dealing with wizards. This potion, which looks like a dreamy blue bellflower color, will make it impossible for anyone to recite the spell smoothly once it is taken. Looking down from the porthole of the airship is different from the scenery seen on the Hogwarts train. No wonder humans aspire to conquer the sky. The feeling of having the whole world at your feet is truly intoxicating. The clouds passing by outside the window seem to be within reach. I don't know which spell Professor Flitwick activated, and all the walls in the cabin became transparent. For a moment, Gretel felt like he was flying, and even the whistling wind in his ears was simulated by the magic spell. It wasn't until he was far away from Hogwarts that Professor Flitwick found an open space and stopped. It's right here. According to Albus, there may be Death Eaters coming any further away. Although those rats have no abilities, they are still quite annoying. As expected, he was truly a master of dueling, a Death Eater who terrified the British wizarding world. Dean Flitwick only received the comment of being a nasty rat. Taking out the door key that had been modified from his arms, Gretel held it solemnly in his hand. By the way, in the British wizarding world, it is illegal to make door keys privately. Gretel didn't realize this until just before using it. Headmaster Dumbledore is indeed the famous White Devil. No wonder the Ministry of Magic. Before finishing his thoughts, Gretel disappeared in front of Professor Flitwick in a burst of space distortion. In a city far away from Hogwarts, a gloomy voice came from an old sofa. Catch up and let the people who just left come back. They are no longer in the UK. On a hot June day, there was actually a fireplace burning in this old and dilapidated apartment. A wrinkled old man huddled on the sofa, squeezing his orders from his throat. Gretel had known the portkey's journey would not be friendly. But he didn't know it would be so uncomfortable. Compared with apparition, the difference between the two is like, one is a household spin washing machine, and the other is an endless cement mixer. Gretel was in a very embarrassed state when he landed. He lay on the ground with a retching sound coming from his throat from time to time. Perhaps my invention will still be put to use. Dear Professor Tom, I will definitely repay, cross out repay, you. Grete thought as he lay on the ground. After all, if the message could be delivered easily, no one would want to endure the vertigo. Keeping this matter in mind, Grete decided to do some research during this vacation in America. If it is really possible, his business territory will soon be expanded. Come on, kid, drink it. Gretel was still resisting the dizziness caused by the portkey when an old but gentle voice came from his head. The first thing I saw was the turquoise potion with silvery white steam emitting from the opened bottle. Gretel, who has enough experience in brewing potions, can be sure that the bottle in front of him is the most suitable demulcent for him at this moment. After thanking him hurriedly, Grete grabbed the potion bottle and drank it in one gulp. Only after reheating the demulcent can it exert its own effect, and the warm liquid slides into the stomach pouch. But a wave of coolness arose, traveling all the way up his spine, until it soothed Gretel's discomfort caused by the space transition. The dizziness disappeared, and Gretel felt as if he had just saved his life. He regretted now that he had not returned from Snape's office with a few more bottles. Gretel, who was in regret, did not realize that the demulcent would not be effective if it was not reheated. Returning to normal, Grete stood up and immediately thanked the savior in front of him. Didn't even have time to clean myself up first. The second update is sent. Thank you dear book friends for your support. We started testing the waters after midnight. As we all know, the quality of testing the waters indicates the life of a new book. Therefore, the author implores all book lovers not to keep books during the recommendation period. Please click to the last chapter every day. Whether you live or die depends on our recommendation. Don't worry, we will definitely update it when it is released. Thank you. Small Thea to Gretel. Professor Tom, do you like washing machines? How about I send you to keep it company? Voldemort. Wait, Gretel, let's just say, if I help you get more follow-up and recommendation votes, will you respect your teacher? Gretel, of course, I keep my word. Voldemort, well, it's up to me. Dear book lovers, I'm Voldemort. I have split myself into 7 Horcruxes. As long as you send me reading antiquates, after I'm resurrected, I will send everyone a copy of the Hogwarts notice. Graduation will also provide you with a high-paying job in the Ministry of Magic. There are unlimited places. Come quickly chapter 41 sniff. The person who reached out to help him up was an old wizard who could tell he was old. The man with silver hair and grey blue eyes looked at Grete curiously, but his eyes were gentle and did not make Grete feel any discomfort at all. He is a bit thin, wearing a knee-length grey and black coat, and his loose and decent casual trousers are tucked into long boots that reach down to his calves. The boots were polished so brightly that Gretel felt like they could reflect his own shadow. It can be seen that this old wizard lives a good life. The last old wizard Gretel had seen who took care of himself so meticulously was Dumbledore. When Gretel was still thinking about how to introduce himself, the old wizard in front of him spoke. "Hello, are you Mr. McGarrett?" His voice was gentler than his eyes, but there seemed to be a hint of unnoticeable tension. "Yes, McGarrett, the wizard from England, would like to thank you for your generous help." Gretel's eyes gradually brightened, and he seemed to know who the person in front of him was. "Hello, I'm Newt Scamander, and like you, I'm from England. Professor Dumbledore said you would arrive today, and I have been waiting for you." As expected, the person in front of me, who still looks a bit introverted, even though he is old, is the author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. In the process of capturing Grindelwald, the master of magical beasts, Newt Scamander made a huge contribution. Perhaps because of his age, the freckles on his face are not so obvious. This is also the reason why Gretel didn't dare to confirm Newt's identity at first glance. That Newt stretched out his hand and pointed at the dust on Gretel's body. In the magical world, if two wizards don't trust each other very much, normally, no one would point their wand at another person, and that usually meant a duel. Gretel said sorry and used clean up on himself. "Hello." Gretel didn't know how to address the wizard in front of him. Perhaps seeing his embarrassment, Newt smiled and said, "Mr. Newt or Mr. Scamander, you can call me whatever you like." Grete thought about it and felt that she should hug the thigh in front of her. "Hello, Dr. Scamander, I'll leave it to you for the next few months. I will try not to cause any trouble to you." Newt smiled. He didn't hesitate to deal with muggles, so he knew the meaning of this title. That's right. He specializes in the protection of magical animals. According to the Muggle world, he can indeed be regarded as a doctor, and he is even the best among doctors. "Then, Mr. Gretel, please come in and take a rest." Newt stepped aside, revealing the 3-story building behind him. Only then did Gretel have time to look at his surroundings. Newt's 3-story building is located in a small village. The village should not be big, and you can see the edge of the village at a glance. However, it shouldn't be very far from the city. At least, from the distant horizon, you can see the rows of tall city buildings in the distance. The courtyard has the rough style of an American small town. If nothing else, it can be seen from the size of the courtyard. It has only one characteristic. It is large. It's like a small town that often appears in western movies. In the courtyard wall surrounded by logs, a small wooden building with a red roof and white walls sits alone in the center of the courtyard. Along the wall, there are many 4-flower flowers planted, and several tall red maples are swaying in the breeze. From the corner of the house, you can see that there are many fruit trees planted in the backyard, but it is obvious that they are not yet mature, covered with green skin, and they are bathing happily in the sunshine. It looks like they will live here for a long time. Several vegetable plots have been cultivated on the land without large plants, and many vegetable seedlings have sprouted. The shrubs in the corners were also cleaned, and after drying, they were all piled neatly under the shed in the corner of the yard, probably to be used as dry firewood. Newt didn't rush Gretel. He just followed him quietly, observing him curiously. Until a head with grey hair, but neatly taken care of, was poked out of the kitchen of the small building. "Newt, let me tell you, when are you two planning to come in for something to eat? There will be plenty of time to get acquainted with each other." Newt scratched his head sheepishly, but still didn't urge him. "My wife, poor Pontina Goldstein." Newt raised his voice. "Tina, wait a moment. We will come right away," and let Gretel finish reading. Professor Dumbledore said that Mr. Gretel is coming to America for the first time, and he hopes I can take good care of him. "I'm sorry, Dr. Scamander, I'm rude. I should have visited the hostess first." From Mrs. Newt's attitude alone. Gretel already knew who was in charge of the family point under Newt's embarrassed eyes. Grete quickened his pace with him and walked into the small red building in the center of the yard. Hello, Mrs. Turner. My name is McGarrett. From Hogwarts. Obviously, after living in England for so many years, Gretel has already become proficient in etiquette. Tina Goldstein's hair has the same natural curls as Newt's, but the waves are larger than Newt's. Unlike Newt's silver white hair, her hair was only greyish white. Mrs. Turner's clothes were very homely, and she didn't even take off her apron. Little Gretel, right? Dumbledore has written countless letters, praising you in every word. Come and let me see. Obviously, compared with Newt, who is afraid of society, Mrs. Turner is a social cow. After looking at Grete's whole body, he pulled Grete and pushed him to the seat. Don't call me madam, if you don't mind. Just call me Tina. That's how our grandson calls me. Of course, for him, Tina pointed to Newt, who was taking off his coat, and said, don't call him doctor, just call him Newt. You British people are so polite. When I was listening to you talking at home just now, I almost laughed out of my teeth. Gretel really didn't expect that a gentleman trained in England would marry such a generous lady. But what can I say? He likes this atmosphere very much, this family where he will stay for several months in the future. The first feeling I gave him was that he was very harmonious. After the pleasant tea, Tina left space for the two wizards, one big and one small. You know, Dumbledore's letter, but I asked Newt to use his talent to help him sense the dark side of this little wizard. Although Newt was afraid of society, he still knew how to get along with this little wizard who was about the same age as his grandson. Instead of letting Grete sit there, he proposed to take Grete to see the magical creatures he had collected and protected for many years. Lead Grete down to the basement. It was obvious that a traceless stretching spell had been cast in the basement, and the environment here did not seem cramped. Lighting and ventilation should also be achieved through some kind of magic spell. If Gretel hadn't seen him walking down the stairs with his own eyes, Gretel wouldn't even have realized that this was a basement. When you enter the basement, the first thing you see is a bookshelf filled with various notes. A simple brown desk is placed in the center. Newt introduced that the notes on the bookshelf were all recorded by him over the years and were related to the protection of magical creatures. Gretel looked curiously. He was looking for the Niffler, who was number 1 on Grindelwald's hate list, Newt's good partner, and who regarded the flash of light as his life point, until Newt pulled out a suitcase from the corner that looked like it had been used for a long time. The moment he opened it, a black and grey animal jumped out of it. He moved very fast and could only vaguely see a faint light running around him. At this time, Newt's warning voice came faintly. Gretel, protect your things. Sure enough, after rummaging around for a while, Grete found that the few galleons in his pocket and the school badge on his chest were all missing. I don't know how many book lovers came in from the recommended site. Thank you for your support. Small Thea to Gretel, my dear Professor Tom. It seems that your appeal is not good enough, so no wonder I'm cruel to the students. Prepare the washing machine and the cement mixer truck. Voldemort. Wait, I'll beg again. Dear wizards, please click on the recommendation votes in your hands. I, Voldemort, promise in the name of the Dark Lord that I will kill Fudge, the Minister of Magic, and let the book friends who are pursuing the book take the place on a first come, first served basis. In addition, we are sincerely recruiting 7 department heads, including the Director of the Office for the Prohibition of Abuse of Magic, the Director of the Office for the Prohibition of Misuse of Muggle Items, the Director of the Office for the Detection and Collection of Counterfeit Defensive Spells and Protective Supplies, and the Director of the Aura Command. The remuneration will be generous, so please come quickly if you are interested. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42. Fantastic beasts are here. Newt shook his head helplessly and grabbed Sniff, who returned to him. I'm sorry, Grete. There's no harm in sniffing it. I'll let it return the thing to you. But it was obvious that Xiu was unwilling. One of his paws was tightly covering the pocket on his belly point, pretending to be fierce. It raised its other paw and opened its flat pink yellow mouth, fully venting its anger at being imprisoned by Newt Point. But it was obvious that Newt had known its temperament for decades, ignoring its innocent eyes. In front of Gretel, he grabbed its feet and shook it upside down point with a clatter of gold and silver treasures colliding. A pile of treasure mixed with various glittering objects appeared on the ground in front of Newt Point: gold galleons, silver sicko, but unfortunately I didn't see copper nut. It seems that XIU doesn't like copper coins without dazzling light point. In addition to cash, there were also various gems and jewelry. Gretel even saw many cut and shiny glass ornaments. It wasn't until the things on the ground were about to be buried up to Gretel's ankles that Newt emptied Snuff's pockets. Tina, I found your necklace. Newt looked extremely excited. It was his and Tina's first anniversary gift for their 10th wedding anniversary. Point as the first gift given by the straight man. Tina cherished it very much. Point. If there were no important guests to meet, she would not be willing to take the necklace out of the jewelry box. Point. Who would have thought that once you take a trip to America, you will disappear? Although she said she was fine, Newt still noticed carefully, and she would look at the jewelry box from time to time. Point. Who would have thought that this little thing, XIU, was secretly hidden? Point. Tina heard the sound and rushed over, taking XIU away for interrogation. Point. She asked herself that she usually took good care of this little guy, but she was still being repaid with revenge. Point. Looking at the pile of physical evidence in front of him, Newt felt a little embarrassed. Point. In order to express his apology, he casually grabbed a handful of galleons and stuffed them into Gretel's hands. It's best to put all the shiny things into a container with the traceless stretch charm cast on it. Otherwise you have to be careful not to let Snuff get close to you. Point. Come on, let me show you magical beasts. If I remember correctly, my first year at Hogwarts should have read the book I wrote, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It can be heard that Newt's tone is very proud. In the wizarding world, no matter which state he is in, when it comes to magical creatures, he is the living master. What Newt is proud of is not that he has published a book, but that with his own efforts and persistence, the current situation of many magical creatures has indeed improved a lot. The illustrations in the textbook are all drawn by me, one stroke at a time. Today I will show you the real thing. Looking inside from the open box, we can see an arrow ladder that doesn't look very sturdy. Point. Even if a little wizard like Gretel walked up, he could hear its overwhelmed creaking sound. Be careful, no matter what you see. Don't be reckless. Newt was waiting for Gretel at the bottom of the ladder, his face serious. Gretel knew it. After all, it was said in popular science books that most magical creatures did not like wizards. If a magical creature becomes stressed due to panic, you will only be the unlucky one. Point. Grete had never thought that the seamless stretching spell could be so powerful. From the outside, it looked like a small suitcase, no more than 10 inches tall. Point. The interior space is like an independent world. Point. Grasslands, rainforests, swamps, glaciers, deserts, all geographical environments that Grete can think of exist in this space. Point. There is even a magic simulated sun in the sky, providing sunlight for this not so small ecosystem. Point. The distant mountain top at the end of the site was accompanied by lightning and thunder. Those are thunderbirds. They are native to North America. The Ministry of Magic's danger level is XXXX. However, they are not in a good mood these days. You may not have the chance to observe them closely. Gretel had seen the image of a thunderbird in a textbook. It was very majestic. The wingspan of an adult thunderbird could reach 10 meters. It has 6 wings and 1 tail, and its body is blue, with only its belly covered in pure white feathers. Thunderbird nerves are also the wand core material favored by ancient wizards. It is similar to the phoenix feather wand core, which can enhance the wizard's spells, but is easier to control than the phoenix feather wand. Point. Because it was so easy to use, the thunderbird was once on the verge of extinction. Point. It wasn't until Newt initiated protection that the thunderbird slowly reappeared in nature. Point. The botricle is probably the closest magical creature to Newt besides the Niffler, even though they are shy by nature. When they saw Newt and his people coming over, the botricles came over excitedly. Point. There were also a few brave ones that climbed up along his trousers. Their rage is easy to tell. The younger they are, the crisper and tender their color is. The botricles' limbs are very slender and look like twigs, with 2 leaves on top of their heads, which should be their hair. What amused Grete the most was that a little botricle that looked like it had just been born had most likely mistakenly recognized the wrong person and climbed on top of him. Ignoring the surprised elders on the ground, he climbed up to Gretel's shoulders, only to realize that he had found the wrong person. In shock, it was about to fall to the ground. Fortunately, Grete caught it keenly and carefully put it back on the ground. Until Grete and Newt left, it hid behind a tree stump, exploring its 2 tender green leaves, carefully looking at the stranger. Hippogriffs are classified as extremely dangerous magical creatures by the Ministry of Magic. There was actually a large group of people in Newt's space. Under Newt's guidance, Gretel and this seemingly uneasy creature got along quite well. If he and Newt were not in a hurry to continue admiring other magical animals, the hippogriff would have carried Gretel on his back and taken him on a nice flight. Faced with Newt's obstruction, the winged beast was a little dissatisfied, stamping its feet and snoring. Fortunately, Newt comforted them and said that Gretel would live for a long time. And now he had to meet other new friends. There would be many opportunities in the future, so they would give up. The poisonous horned beasts that looked particularly ferocious turned out to be particularly friendly. Faced with Gretel's feeding, they ran into the pool and performed their specialty savage charge on Gretel. The territory where the cystic leopard and the billywig were located was separated. They are dangerous. Just look at them from a distance. Birds and snakes kept in cups. Colorful curled winged devils, evil birds with sweet sounds that can make people lose their minds. After listening to them for a long time, Grete felt as if he had arrived at the World Expo of exotic and bizarre animals, and his eyes couldn't even see enough. Newt is worthy of being a master of magical beasts recorded in history textbooks. Countless creatures are classified as extremely dangerous by the Ministry of Magic. In front of him, everyone is gentle and like a good baby. Even when facing a stranger like Grete, the worst attitude they can take is to snort a few times or leave Grete with his back. No one shows any desire to attack. Ahead is the home of the invisible beasts. According to the degree of danger, they should be near the entrance point, but they prefer quiet, so they chose this place. There are not many invisible beasts, only 4 or 5 out of a dozen. The textbook says they look like monkeys, but Grete felt that they were like pure white elves, leaning silently on the tree stump, filling their mouths with nuts or fruits from time to time. Just like what Newt introduced, they are very humane. Even the invisible beasts that look very old look at them like old people enjoying their old age. There are stories written in his eyes after Newt's introduction. They stood up slowly, and even when they came to Gretel, they made a standard salute and then extended their hands to Gretel. Thank you to book friends Mauleo and Daleo for your monthly support, and thank you all for your recommendation votes. This is the second update today, and there will be another update later. It will be late. Dear book lovers, I will read it tomorrow. Good night in advance. There is no small theater, but I have a question. What are the favorite magical animals among book lovers? The author likes botricles and birds and snakes. Chapter 43 Another Night Attack. Seeking for further reading, Grete secretly complained in his heart that the invisible beast was more of a gentleman than him. While catching the hand of friendship extended by the invisible beast. The invisible beast's hands are not big, even half the size of 11-year-old Gretel's. Looking closer, Gretel didn't find a trace of dirt on it. Each strand of silk-like fine hair seems to be shining with silver light every moment. Newt had previously introduced that the invisible beast was the Niffler's best friend, and Gretel fully suspected that it wanted to pluck the fur from the invisible beast. It was obviously just a magical animal, but Gretel could see a hint of sadness in its dark eyes, hidden in its hair. Newt stood aside, silently observing the invisible beast's expression. From the beginning, this was the destination where he brought Gretel in. Unlike most wizards, Newt felt that the most precious thing about invisible beasts was not their silver white fur that could be used to weave invisibility cloaks. It is their innate gift of prophecy that makes every fortune teller who is tortured and going crazy because he cannot interpret the meaning of the divination images jealous. Newt is born close to nature and can live in harmony with any magical animal. That's why I learned from the invisible beasts. about their unknown and enviable prophecy talent. It is precisely because of the protection of their innate gift of prophecy that they have managed to survive despite the wizard's coveting of their invisible fur. It can even be said that invisibility has never been their greatest reliance. The name Newt didn't include in the book was the seer in Fantastic Beasts. No one, Newt, not even Dumbledore, knew about this secret ever since he first received Dumbledore's letter. He had been thinking about how to face Gretel. Like Dumbledore, Newt also experienced 2 generations of Dark Lords, Grindelwald and Voldemort. Even Grindelwald, the Dark Lord, was finally brought to justice with his own help. He knew very well that the current magical world could no longer afford any turmoil. The development of the Muggles has long left the wizards behind. To the wizards, describing it as lingering is like beautifying. If the wizarding world welcomes a new Dark Lord who is stronger than Grindelwald and Voldemort, the wizarding world will definitely be turned upside down. Even without waiting for Muggles to break the balance in the future, wizards will collectively disappear into history. Therefore, even if his talent keeps telling him that the little wizard in front of him is harmless now and can be trusted, Newt wants to take Gretel to see the invisible beast. He needs the invisible beast to give him reassurance. One man and one beast did not hold hands for long. It was like 2 strangers meeting for the first time. Neither of them was too embarrassed to shake hands for too long. After polite greetings, they went their separate ways. One returned to Newt and marveled at the gentleness and elegance of the invisible beast, a magical animal. The other one turned around and returned to the tree hole where he was living. After picking and choosing for a while, he picked up a little furball. Newt suddenly couldn't understand. Invisible beasts have a strong sense of family. As long as they are recognized by them, any person or animal will be regarded as their family. Just like him and Sniff, they are all non-staff members of the invisible beast group. However, things have priorities and people have closeness and distance. Naturally, there is no way to compare non-staff personnel with the inheritance of blood. The little furball brought by the invisible beast is the new newborn of their tribe this year. Even Newt only saw it once from a distance, and it was absolutely impossible to get close. He didn't know what the invisible beast saw in the prophecy that made it behave so intimately towards Gretel. And from the looks of it, it wasn't just that he wanted to show Gretel his little cub. The hand that was handed over obviously wanted to give this cub to him. Facing Gretel's questioning gaze, Newt didn't know what to say for a moment. This was the first time Newt had seen this situation in all his years. He really didn't know how to explain it, so he had no choice but to take Gretel and run away. Drive. Scamander was there just now. After all, Gretel couldn't restrain his thirst for knowledge and asked his question while holding hot tea. Newt rubbed his nose in embarrassment. I think it's because you are too popular with them. I don't know the specific reason yet. I need to communicate with them to find out. You have to stay here for a few months and you will definitely know why before you leave. If you have nothing else to do, you might as well study it with me. Magical creatures are really interesting, and I remember starting to dissect Hogrup in my bedroom when I was 7 years old. Hogrup, a mushroom from Scandinavia with strong reproductive capacity. The Ministry of Magic's rating is X level. Gretel declined. Although magical animals were really interesting, Gretel's business plan did not include wild animals. He will also take advantage of this time to conduct market research in America. He wanted to earn his first pot of gold and lay a solid foundation for his business empire before the Muggle communications market took off. After feeling the pain of the portkey last time, Grete felt that he might have underestimated his invention. Wizards perhaps needed instant communication more than he thought. At night, everything is quiet. From the gap in the suitcase in the basement, a pair of palms covered with silver fluff slowly stretched out and quietly opened the suitcase. The open suitcase is generous and radiates sunlight from the inner space to the basement. Several figures appeared furtively, then gradually faded in the light, and the cat came out of the basement. However, because it has not left the space all year round, the invisible beast obviously did not realize how many warning spells Newt had made to prevent the magical creatures in this space from causing trouble. The moment they stepped out of the basement, the alarm sounded throughout the entire building. At 360 degrees: imprisonment curse, swamp curse, freezing curse, weakness curse, stunning curse, all the magic spells that could slow down the escape of magical animals. Smashed several invisible beasts in just a short moment. Grete also rushed out in his pajamas. Unlike ordinary first year wizards, he has already mastered most of the magic spells to level 3, and if he takes action within a certain period of time, the effect will be no less effective than that of any adult wizard. But what surprised a few people was that when they rushed to the basement, they didn't see the culprit who opened the suitcase. There were only open suitcases on the ground and a few botrickles struggling to climb outward. When he saw Newt appear, he was leaning down to hook his companion's botrickle on the steps below and jumped up angrily. He pointedly complained to Newt. Gretel couldn't understand the meaning of the botrickle's hands and feet, but he could understand the confusion on Newt's face. That expression was exactly the same as the complicated expression on Quirrell's face when Gretel took out the textbook from the small bag given by Voldemort in front of him. Emergency. Appearance. Accompanied by Newt's curse. Several invisible beasts held up their own cubs and appeared in the swamp formed by the curse in an angry and funny manner. Their faces were full of astonishment, as if they didn't expect Newt, a man with thick eyebrows and big eyes, to actually install traps for them. Newt, Tina, and Grete, all sitting together for the trial. Botrickle, as a witness, waved flags and shouted from the BOGO stand on the side. Adding to his prestige. Several invisible beasts were holding their cubs in their arms, squatting awkwardly in the middle, waiting for Newt's trial. As the case proceeds, Gretel has a big question mark on his forehead. What? Another night attack? The third update today. Good night. Thanks to all the book lovers for reading. I love you. Thanks to the book friend Feng Leo for his monthly support. There are too many recommendation votes, so I can't thank them all, but my thoughts are here. I kowtow, and thank you all for your recommendation votes and support. In addition, shamelessly continue to pursue reading small theater. Gretel's monologue, 11 years of time travel, 1 year of being a wizard, Dumbledore kidnapping me, Voldemort attacking me at night, and now the invisible beast and Triggered are also attacking me at night. How many people have this plan? All of them come out. In the shadows of the darkness, the masked people raised their fingers in understanding. Hush, life goes on, and night attacks continue. Chapter 44. Cute little guy, please follow up. I reject. Faced with the invisible beast's move to send its cubs on board, Gretel decisively chose to refuse. He is not even willing to be the nanny of the savior, so how could he choose to be the protector of a race of magical animals? Not to mention that the invisible beast is preparing for a night attack, but just thinking about the trouble that the invisible beast may cause if the whole family is united. Gretel will firmly refuse. Everyone knows that an invisible beast means an invisibility cloak. What is the fur of the invisible beast? It is a life-saving weapon. A living invisible beast is like a moving golden mountain. If people knew that he had accepted an entire race of invisible beasts as his followers, there will be endless troubles waiting for him, and the hot-eyed white wizard will let him know what the unpredictable nature of human nature is without the black wizard taking action. Gretel's life motto has always been to go through troubles without leaving a single leaf behind. How could he take the initiative to take over such a trouble? Hearing Gretel's categorical rejection, the invisible beast's big eyes became even sadder. The figure holding the cub looked extremely lost, and Newt had no choice but to comfort him. As long as you stay in the space, no one can threaten your safety. I have protected you for so many years, and nothing has happened to you, right? The invisible beast seemed to be trapped in its own sorrow and could not extricate itself. It just gently stroked the ignorant cub in its arms. Seeing the end of the matter, the botrickle on the side jumped down from the BOGO stand with dignity. He walked up to Gretel bravely and jumped up and down. Why, you guys want to go with him too? Newt said amusedly. Who would have thought that? After listening to his words, the huddled botrickles nodded wildly and then shook their heads wildly. The last one was obviously bigger than the others. A little guy with a bright green head pulled out from the tree pile. Pushed in front of Gretel. It was the one that accidentally climbed onto Grete during the day and was so frightened that he almost fell off. It still looked timid, with its twig-like limbs almost twisted into a ball. The small brown eyes hidden under the two buds on the top of the head secretly observed Gretel's expression. Grete still remembered this little guy and stretched out his hand to tease it a few times, which made it shy. The bark-like skin was spitting out steam, and he was about to faint. Gretel quickly retracted his hand. Several older Bowtruckles held their little cub in their arms and comforted it for a while before its mood stabilized. But after this battle, the little guy never wanted to show up again. He huddled next to a group of elders, secretly observing the little wizard in front of him through the cracks in their heads, making him feel comfortable. Newt found it interesting. Whether it was an invisible beast or a Bowtruckle, they were all naturally loved by nature. They are simple-minded, and will only get close to creatures that are in harmony with nature. As for wizards, they generally rarely show such closeness to wizards, except for them Hufflepuffs. The most powerful thing about wizards from Hufflepuff is their affinity. Even in the ancient rainforest, which is full of dangers, you can still make your own friends just like him. When he was young, he went deep into the Amazon and didn't have to find food by himself for several months. His animal friends will spontaneously bring food to him while he is studying. The last person to make a magical creature feel so emotional was Grindelwald decades ago. Of course, perhaps that emotion is more appropriately called restlessness. What Gretel felt was the passion that belonged to magical creatures. He has studied magical creatures all his life and has never experienced them a few times. Newt's interest in making friends with magical creatures stems from his interest and talent. Open up your heart, slowly get familiar with magical animals and yourself, and finally gain trust. Gretel's treatment was obviously much rougher than his own. At least, for so many years, no magical animal has ever thought of giving itself a cub when they first met. Not even those old friends who have been together for decades in space. What happened today was so bizarre that it would have been better if he had not seen it with his own eyes, but had been told to him by someone else. He will definitely feel that this person is making up stories. If he was a dark wizard, he would have been unable to hold himself back by now and would have tied up Gretel and studied it. Gretel couldn't understand the signs of the branches in front of him, so the Bowtruckle had to turn his head and ask for Newt's help. One person and one magical animal, just like playing a game where you draw and I guess one gestures and the other interprets simultaneously. Well, what it says is that, unlike the invisible beasts, not many wizards covet them. They usually covet the trees they guard that are suitable for making wands, so they are not in much danger. The reason why he comes to see you late at night is because this little guy likes the smell of you. They followed you because they were worried that you would take in the invisible beast's cub, so they didn't want to take in another little guy. They have no other ideas, and only this cute little guy follows you. That's it. The Bowtruckle turned back and blinked his little eyes together with a large group of twigs, looking at Grete eagerly. The little guy with the green head was about to cry when he saw his silent look. Grete, Bowtruckle has always been of a peaceful temperament. If you don't want to accept it, that's okay. Even when Newt didn't speak for them, the Bowtruckles didn't show any displeasure. However, Bowtruckles guard trees all year round. Even if the wand is no longer a tree, the natural lore on them can still help wizards cultivate their wands. Okay. Grete nodded. While Newt was still helping Bowtruckle to say good things, Gretel quickly nodded his head. The Bowtruckles and Newt didn't react for a moment, staring at Gretel blankly. Only the invisible beast, holding its cub and secretly feeling sad, suddenly raised its head. His eyes were full of shock and loss. Yes, I mean it's okay. I like this little guy very much. Grete confirmed again. No one reacted. The little guy who was hiding shyly next to his elders just now jumped out suddenly. Running at the highest speed in his life, he climbed up along the hem of Gretel's pajamas. He climbed up to Gretel's shoulder and kissed his cheek intimately. He woke up immediately, slid down his pajamas, and hid in the pocket of his pajamas. There were only 2 buds emerging from the mouth of the bag. Trembling in embarrassment. For a moment, all 3 people present were so amused that they couldn't help laughing. Hearing everyone's laughter, the little guy squeezed into the corner of his pocket even more shyly, with no intention of showing up again. Only then did the Bowtruckles react, and each of them became excited. They gathered around Gretel and formed a circle holding hands. Here the Botricles are singing and dancing. On the other side, the invisible beast looked at Gretel and let out a long sigh. Finally he picked up the cub and walked towards the open box in despair. Seeing the invisible beast's lost back, Newt didn't know how to comfort him for a moment. After all, Gretel made the decision, and there was nothing he could do. If he was rejected, Newt could only watch them leave, thinking about going to the space to comfort these old friends. After everything was over, Newt rearranged the warning device at the basement door, and the group of people went back to rest point. As soon as he returned to the room, the little guy stuck his head out of his pocket and looked at the outside world curiously. Thanks to book friend 20210660316174666483435 for the reward. Thank you to the Ashes boss of book Friends Rabbit Family for your monthly ticket support. Small theater song of the invisible beast. So sad it turns out that I'm the only one who is superfluous. Why abandon me like worn out shoes? I just want to accompany you silently from heaven to hell. That's all. It's just wishful thinking, but second still wish you happiness in this life. Botricle, eating melon. 6. Chapter 45. I have witnessed my own death. Seeking for further reading. Seeing its furtive observation, Gretel simply took it out of his pocket. The little guy hid for a moment and then gently hugged Gretel's fingers. He rubbed him with 2 young leaves on his head. I have to say that most cubs in nature look very cute. Coupled with the Botricle's already delicate body, it somewhat comforted Gretel's heart, which was tired from the night attack. Okay, I'm going to bed. Do you want to play by yourself, or do you want to sleep with me? Grete touched the little guy's leaves and asked curiously. He didn't know whether the Botricle was a plant or an animal, or whether it needed sleep. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, written by Newt, introduces this creature. In the book, the Botricle is regarded as an animal. It usually feeds on insects and protects the trees where it lives. It is the guardian of nature's trees. Once a logger or tree repairer attempts to destroy the home where it lives, this usually shy and gentle creature will summon up the courage to pounce on the mangrily. Because the trees they inhabit are suitable for making wands, wizards will donate woodcutter to them so that they can get the branches they need to make wands. Botricles look so inconspicuous, so naturally in the Ministry of Magic's rating. The level of danger is not too high. There are only 2 X's, which are considered beneficial species in the wizarding world. Many wizards tame them as their pets. They can also be found in the magical creatures shop in Diagon Alley, but as they are in hot demand, they are usually divided up by wizards who love them within a few days of arrival. Facing Grete's inquiry, the little guy's shy nature came out again, and he ran to the bedside. With a slight jump, he came to the desk, holding the wand on the desk without letting go. Green light emerged from his body and slowly enveloped the wand. The little guy was born not long ago. He has a slender figure and can just fit into the gap between the grapevine trees. Only the 2 sprouts that emerged slightly trembled slightly with the light. Gretel believed that if others didn't look carefully, they might think that his wand had sprouted. As Grete turned off the lights, the dim light surrounding the wand also silently dimmed. It did not stop weakening until it was sure that it would not affect his sleep. However, the little guy obviously never thought about how the wizard could let the wand go too far away from him. Gretel touched the darkness, reached out and took down his grapevine wand and placed it safely on his pillow. The light that circulated like breathing suddenly stopped for a moment. It wasn't until he was sure that Gretel had made no other movements that he raised the wand again. Unfortunately, no one noticed that Gretel slightly curved the corners of his mouth and whispered good night. Good morning, Mrs. Tanner, may I help you? The next day, Grete got up very early, cleaned himself up, and walked into the kitchen. No, Gretel, just go and sit at the dining table. I'll get it ready soon. Would you like milk or mushroom soup for breakfast? Mrs. Tanner, just milk. Tanner nodded. Yes, it's better for the little wizard to drink more milk. Our Ulf, who is tall, is almost worrying me to death. He tries to secretly pour out the milk in the cup every day. Oh, Rolf Scamander, our little grandson's name. Grete nodded. He had a vague impression of this name. In the original world line, he seemed to end up with the crazy girl Luna. I don't know if it's because there is an extra little guest in the house, but the breakfast prepared by Mrs. Tinner is really rich. Gretel saw it from Newt's expression. His wide eyes seemed to be accusing Tinner. More than a dozen dinner plates, under the command of Mrs. Tinner, jumped on the dining table one by one with steps that resembled flamenco dance steps. Iberian black pig ham slices, South African peri grilled chicken, fragrant and sweet tree peak honey, sizzling burgundy cheryl lace steak. Tinner, there are only 3 of us. Newt expressed his opinion carefully. Mrs. Tinner raised her eyebrows. What's wrong with the 3 of you? Just because you can't eat, doesn't mean that Gretel can't eat. The little wizard needs nutrition the most. I usually blame you for doting on a UOFU, which is why he grows so thin. After talking about Newt, Tinner turned to Grete and said kindly, Grete, just eat. If it's not enough, I will do it again. Grete mentally wiped the non-existent sweat on his forehead and complained silently in his mind. Mrs. Tinner, according to your feeding method, if Mr. Newt doesn't stop him, your little grandson will probably develop sideways. However, he still said obediently, Ms. Tinner, the food you cook is very delicious. The best thing I have ever eaten. Thank you very much for your hospitality, but I still hope you can take care of yourself. It is still very tiring to cook so much food. Actually, Dr. Scamander is right. The 3 of us can't eat so much. Tinner accepted all Gretel's compliments, her eyes filled with a kind smile. It's okay. I'm not tired. You can eat more. It seemed that Tinner really missed her grandson's failure to accompany the 2 elderly people on vacation. After the meal, Tinner stopped Grete from helping to take care of the table. With a wave of the magic wand, all the cups, plates, and dishes flew into the kitchen, and each one jumped into the sink to clean himself. Newt, didn't you say yesterday that you were going to take Gretel to visit the city today? Go quickly and remember to come back for lunch at noon. At the urging of the hostess of the courtyard, the old man and the young man dressed up and left this village far away from the city, under the clear blue sky, with the breeze blowing. 2 wizards stood on the roadside. When leaving the courtyard, Newt told Gretel that apparating was too uncomfortable. They were not in a hurry anyway, so they took him to see the public transportation used by wizards in America. He also vowed that he would be surprised. Gretel's curiosity was aroused by Newt, and he wanted to see what the comfortable and fast transportation method Newt mentioned was. Newt stood on the roadside and stretched his uneven oak wand toward the sky. After a moment, a black shadow appeared in the distant sky. After just blinking a few times, a dark 4-wheel carriage appeared in front of the 2 of them. Newt blinked, as if trying to see the shock in Gretel's eyes, but obviously, he was disappointed. In Gretel's eyes, the thestral with a dragon's head and a horse's body was so majestic, its whole body was pitch black, and the pair of broad and tough fleshy wings on its back retracted to its side safely. After landing. Looking closer, there is no flesh on the thestral's body. The black fur is tightly attached to the skeleton, and every bone is clearly visible. The pupilless eyes on the dragon's head were white, staring intently at the 2 wizards waiting for the bus. Can you see it? Newt's eyes were full of shock. Yes, I can. This is a thestral, Gretel said firmly. I have seen death with my own eyes. Only then did Newt remember Gretel's origin, which was mentioned in Dumbledore's letter as an orphanage. What is the most popular thing in welfare homes? In addition to children whose families cannot afford to raise them and are forced to abandon them, there are even more abandoned babies suffering from various incurable diseases. Newt touched Gretel's head sadly. Sorry, Gretel, I forgot. Before he could say the next words, Gretel comforted him. It's okay, Dr. Scamander, I've long been used to it. In fact, contrary to what Newt thought, the death he saw for the first time had nothing to do with the children in the orphanage. The death he saw came from himself. No one knew about these things, and he didn't plan to tell anyone. After all, he had no contact with his previous life. His current identity is just Gretel, a first-year wizard from Ravenclaw. And McGregor, thank you all book friends for your recommendation votes. I would like to ask you all to send me your votes. Thank you. Thank you all for your follow-up reading. I will definitely thank you, and keep writing. Small theater Newt. Damn it, Dumbledore, I seem to have mentioned something I shouldn't have mentioned. Gretel won't become a pursuer of immortality because of my words, Dumbledore. Newt, I really am Voldemort. Well done, Mr. Newt. Are you interested in coming to work with me? I think you are suitable to help me provide psychological counseling to Death Eaters. Gretel, the thoughts of adult wizards are messy, and they only know how to make up for others all day long. I declare again, that immortality is of no use to me. I just want to live a wonderful life. Chapter 46 Market Street, Diagon Alley of America, seeking for follow-up reading. Hiccup. Newt burped happily, smelling slightly of alcohol. Zoo was usually too strictly controlled by Mrs. Tinner. After she and Gretel boarded the carriage. He couldn't wait to order a cup of hot and fragrant butterbeer, and drank it in one gulp. Newt said, perhaps feeling Gretel's gaze. Underage. Wizards are not allowed to drink, but there is lava chocolate milk here, which is the favorite of young wizards in America. Grete shook his head and refused. He refused to consume alcohol, and was equally insensitive to the sweet drink. But speaking of it, Newt actually liked butterbeer, which really surprised Gretel. You know, butterbeer is more of a slightly alcoholic beverage than wine. This drink has always been more popular among teenage wizards. Many senior students at Hogwarts go to Hogsmeade every week, just for butterbeer. Some people even bring it to school to drink, such as a senior at the year-end dinner, although Hogwarts does not support this behavior. But among adult wizards, it is not so popular. The sweet taste always causes complaints from adult wizards. Adult wizards generally prefer stronger fire whiskey or red currant rum. Or a slightly lower alcohol mead, such as Dumbledore, who often drank it in the office. After a short rest, Newt ordered another drink, sipped slowly, and pointed out the window from time to time, introducing Gretel to the wizarding stronghold, hidden in the Muggle world below. Newt was right. The Thestral carriage was indeed comfortable and fast. Before finishing the second cup of butterbeer, they arrived at today's destination. Okay, we are here. Newt stood up, drank the last half of the beer, and dropped a gold galleons and 13 silver sickles on the table. The place where we got off the bus was in a remote alley in the city, and the street sign said this saint at another intersection not far away. The sign turned out to be another Saint. Grete secretly complained about the strange road name. Follow the sign for 13 steps and tap the mailbox opening 3 times with your wand. Newt spoke as he did so, and after 3 taps, the huge mailbox cracked open in front of the two of them. Hurry up and tie yourself to the wall with a safety belt. Newt's voice was urgent, and Gretel noticed 2 safety belts embedded in the wall of the mailbox. After fastening the seat belt, the cracked mailbox closed again, and with a strong sense of weightlessness, the mailbox disappeared. How do you feel? Newt smiled and straightened his messy silver hair. Well, how should I put it? It's exciting. Gretel was still frightened. Who would have thought that the commercial street of America, which was the benchmark for Diagon Alley in the UK, would welcome customers in such a wild way. Hearing Gretel's comment, Newt burst into laughter instantly, and his hearty laughter made many wizards passing by look at him. But it's obvious that Newt's reputation is a household name in the American wizarding world. Everyone who saw him took off their hats politely and then left in a hurry. Welcome to Market Street. Newt looked happy. He was happy, and it seemed that the young and mature Gretel still retained the child side of her. Like Diagon Alley, this is a shopping street for wizards in America. You can buy everything related to wizards here. Newt was right. You could buy everything here. There are shops on both sides of Market Street, and there are even black magic shops that can only be opened in Nocturne Alley in the UK. The mutilated mummy huddled in the corner of the window, hiding from the sun. Dried lizards and bats sway majestically under the eaves in front of the store. The corpse box, which looked eerie at first sight, was openly erected in the window, soliciting customers who needed it. But Gretel didn't have the chance to look carefully because he was passing by this store. Newt grabbed his hand and walked over quickly. There are a few dusty fireplaces on the street, and from time to time 1 or 2 gray-headed wizards will spit out flu network. The Magical Congress of the United States of America exchanged technology from the British Ministry of Magic, but obviously, they basically don't maintain it. Normally, although Flu Network is uncomfortable, it won't make people so embarrassed. Newt's tone was filled with rejoicing, glad that he didn't bring Gretel with him into such a mess. Perhaps America is indeed wild, and there are many wizards who directly apparate in front of the store they want to go to. Isn't There a counter curse for disembodiment arranged here, Grete? Asked curiously. Point like diagonally in the UK, let alone a pair rating. If you put a simple fluorescent spell in diagonally, you may face charges from the Ministry of Magic. It used to exist, but it was cancelled after a protest by American wizards. Protest. Action. Yes, the content of the protest is that American wizards have the right to cast spells freely. Banning magic is an inhumane act, so now even magic spells are not banned on Market Street. Newt's tone was full of confusion and shock. Of course, I'm not suggesting you take out your wand. At Newt's signal, Gretel saw a man being kicked out of the store with a salesperson holding a wand to his head. Judging from the unreleased magic power hidden at the tip of the wand, it should be a quite powerful attack spell. After a while, 2 auras wrapped in windbreakers rushed over and took the suspect away. I didn't plan to rob. I just wanted to ask them if they could put 2 magic gems on my wand. However, upon hearing his excuse, the salesperson spat viciously. Have you ever seen a serious person go to a leather junk shop and take out a wand and ask for gems? If it weren't for the self-defense rating guidelines that were just promulgated a few days ago, you would have to put yourself together piece by piece. Newt spread his hands and said, I understand. The people next to me seemed to be tourists from other countries. After hearing Newt's words, Gretel and Grete nodded calmly. I brought you here to buy you some golems to practice dueling with. Dumbledore's letter said you were being targeted by Death Eaters. I think you need to strengthen your self-protection skills. After all, no one can protect you at all times except yourself. Gretel's eyes lit up. Ever since Halloween, when he found that he couldn't deal with the troll, Gretel began to research an attack spell suitable for him. However, the unicorn hair wand core did not cooperate, so progress was slow. As for Newt, there should be a solution. Grete's sudden intense gaze made Newt confused for a moment. How come this little Gretel is like a changeable monster with different faces from moment to moment? After buying the golem at Gretel's request, Newt bought him a set of equipment for preparing potions and then went to the drugstore to buy the potion ingredients Gretel needed. Drive. Scamander, I will give you the money after my consignment of potions is finished. I have to say that the development of potion science in America is really rough. A bottle of elation potion, which was only 80% effective, was sold for 12 galleons. You must know that a bottle of perfect medicinal elixir only costs 10 galleons in the UK. It has to be said that Amy has its own national conditions, and Gretel seemed to see a shining golden mountain placed in front of him. The first update is about the chapter. There will be 2 more updates tonight. It will be a little later. You can read it again tomorrow. I wish you all a good night in advance. Thanks to book friends God Loves Myself, Mings001, Another You, and Zuniuan for their monthly support. Thanks to all book friends for their recommendation votes. Small Theater Aura of the Magical Congress of the United States of America, Mike Gretel, we have obtained evidence that you sold a large amount of elation potion, which has violated the potion anti-dumping law, and the proceeds are now confiscated in accordance with relevant regulations. Rubbing hands. Grete. Helpless. I understand. Hand over the large package of gold galleons. Aura. Welcome to the Americas, Mr. Gretel, the British potions master. All potions you configure will be licensed by the Aura Office of the Magical Congress of the United States of America. I wish your business a prosperous future. Chapter 47 Going Home. Drive Scamander, thank you for your unreserved teachings over the past 3 months. Mrs. Tina, thank you for your meticulous care over the past 3 months. I will write to you when I return to the UK. Late August. Gretel packed up his things early in the morning and came downstairs to say goodbye to the 2 old people. Hogwarts would start school in a few days, and he had to go back to England to prepare some supplies needed for the start of school. For other things, it's easy to say that commercial streets in America can also prepare everything. It was Gilderoy Lockhart who was unlucky enough that the textbooks required for 2nd graders turned Out to be a complete set of reading materials written by him. This book was a bestseller in the UK, but across the ocean in America, Lockhart, as an internationally renowned author, did not sell well the books he wrote. Grete tried to order from the bookstore, but the price of nearly 10 times the price dissuaded him. Although in the past 3 months, Grete had accumulated a fairly substantial net worth by selling magic potions, there was no reason for Gretel to choose to be taken advantage of. So I had to go back a few days in advance and go to Flourish and Blott's bookstore to buy the series of books by Gilderoy Lockhart, who was about to be the defense against the dark arts professor from the Americas back to the UK. This kind of cross-continental long-distance movement can either be carried across the ocean on a Muggle ship, or choose the door key. Although it feels very uncomfortable after the transfer, it is convenient and quick at least. Gretel first went to the port to inquire about the cruise ship and learned that the latest ship would not leave until the end of the month. If he takes a boat to England, by the time he returns to Hogwarts, school will have been in session for a week. There was no other way, so Grete had to hold his nose and go to the countryside of Preston, where there was a door key to London. Newton Tinner told Gretel a week ago that they would receive guests from far away today and there was no way to see him off. After saying goodbye to the 2 old men, Gretel packed up his luggage and set off alone. Arriving at the roadside, Gretel stretched out his wand. However, he did not intend to ride the Thestral carriage, but to try his own flying spell that he had modified based on the legacy left by Professor Tom. According to his vision, flying must be safe and comfortable, and the speed and direction can be adjusted as desired. To this end, he ventured to observe dozens of flying creatures and used space. Thunderbird, Crooked Devil, Hippogriff, Bull Escaper. In the end, the thing that gave Gretel the most inspiration was the bird and snake curled up in the cup. Although birds and snakes also have wings, their ability to fly has little to do with their wings. After many studies, it was discovered that birds and snakes achieve flight by instinctively affecting the air near themselves and forming an airspace under their control. This also ignited the inspiration for Grete's research. Plus the legacy of dear Professor Tom. The flight spell created in the end actually formed a wonderful balance between the flight of thoughts and flight in the air. Space. As soon as the spell was cast, the invisible wind instantly filled around Gretel, forming a spherical space with him as the center. This spherical space is the airspace belonging to the Gretel version of the flying spell. Just after Gretel rose from the ground and flew towards Preston. 2 people emerged from a dilapidated, uninhabited small house on the edge of the village. The 2 people looked at each other, and in an instant they looked away in disgust. There is no way who would be willing to act with a wizard, werewolf, if it weren't for the Dark Lord's order as Voldemort's most loyal subordinates. When he asked who was willing to help him capture a young wizard from across the ocean, Selwyn and Fenrir Greyback almost rushed out and took over the order. But what is unpleasant is that what the Dark Lord said is that they only need to capture, not kill. And they are not even allowed to cause excessive harm to the person they want to capture. Especially Fenrir Greyback, who was almost stepped on the head by the Dark Lord and warned, if you dare to touch him a little and let his wounds be contaminated with the dirty werewolf virus, I will make you regret coming to this world. However, if you can complete the task perfectly, I will grant you the identity of a Death Eater until eternity. Fenrir Greyback was a born werewolf. As the leader of the werewolves, he believed in Voldemort. He believed that under Voldemort's rule, the lives of werewolves would be much better, but Voldemort had always ignored their race, and would only temporarily allow him to wear Death Eater costumes when he was needed. Therefore, after the Dark Lord would grant him the official status of a Death Eater, this werewolf whose mind was filled with blood thought for the first time what should be done to bring Gretel back to the Dark Lord without hurting him. For this reason, he was even willing to briefly listen to Selwyn, a Death Eater who always believed in the supremacy of pure blood and was born in the 28 holy tribes. In fact, Selwyn has a big opinion in his heart. The Dark Lord never hides their own purpose. When she learned that the Dark Lord wanted to take a filthy mudblood as his student, Selwyn felt that his world was about to collapse. He followed the Dark Lord because he wanted to realize the magical world where pure blood was supreme as described by the Dark Lord. He tried to ask his question, but then he swallowed it decisively when the Dark Lord stepped on the werewolf and said harsh words. The Dark Lord was, after all, the Dark Lord and his master, and he didn't have the guts to question it. In order to avoid leaving traces, they did not choose the portkey, but chose to mix among muggles and travel across the ocean. According to the instructions of the Dark Lord, they lurked in this small wizarding village, and hid in an abandoned house at the entrance of the village, observing Gretel's every move. They thought about kidnapping Gretel and leaving. But when they saw Newt, they decided to give up. It seems that there are only 3 wizards, 2 old and 1 young, in one house, but one is a former aura of the Magical Congress of the United States of America, and the other is a world famous master of magical creatures. They really don't think they can poke this hornet's nest and escape unscathed. I squatted like this for 3 months, until my whole body was about to grow hair. What Selwyn couldn't bear the most was the smell of the werewolf Fenrir. To avoid exposure, they did not take a bath during the 3 months of summer. In order to avoid unnecessary magic fluctuations, it was not even possible to clean it up. Only in the dead of night, quietly sneak out of the small hut and take a breath of fresh air, then before dawn, huddle up again. The resentment in Selwyn's heart was driving him crazy from the torture day after day. After a long period of torture, he considered how to use a stupid werewolf next to him to turn the mission target into a werewolf and vent his hatred. The Dark Lord can accept a mudblood, but he may not be able to accept a werewolf. As long as he kills the werewolf next to him after completing the mission and wipes his hands and feet clean, he will still be the Dark Lord's most trusted Death Eater. Selwyn, let's go quickly. I can't smell him anymore. Let's follow. Seeing Gretel's shadow flying further and further away, the werewolf Fenrir quickly urged, "It's okay, Fenrir. I believe in your ability. The Dark Lord relies on you the most. This time when we go back, we must take care of each other." Selwyn ignored her conscience and held back her disgust to praise this creature who was even worse than a mudblood. The werewolf Fenrir knew that he was not very smart. In order to complete the mission, he had already handed over command to Selwyn. Because of his beautiful fantasy, he could even endure the stench for 3 months. The rancid sweat wafting from Selwyn, a pure-blood wizard. The second update, and the first update is very late. Dear book friends, be sure not to stay up late. It's okay to read it when you wake up. Good night and sweet dreams. Small theater surface. Fenrir, Selwyn, we must cooperate sincerely and complete the tasks assigned by the Dark Lord. From now on, we will be brothers, sharing joys and sorrows together. In my heart, this werewolf wizard is so disgusting. Can't I get rid of the stink on my body? Even if I roll in the sand a few more times and get it dry cleaned, don't give me a chance. Otherwise I will definitely repay this bad smell. Hatred. Snape. Voiceover. We Death Eaters are like this. We are double dealing. We talk with our hearts, and we use our swords. For Bai Guang's son, the Dark Lord, please die happily. Chapter 48. The Master of the Death Curses. Quick strategy. Please follow up. There is no need to ride a broom. Feng Zhuyu Feng is at ease. Gretel's long-awaited release belonged to the nature of a child, and he assumed various postures in the air. Groot, that little botricle. From birth to today, it has not even left the ground more than 2 meters. When Gretel was writhing in the air, he woke up Groot, who was sleeping with his wand. The little guy carefully raised his head from the grapevines and almost fainted from fright when he looked down. He quickly squeezed his body into the gap. But after 3 months, it was no longer that weak and pitiful look. The small gap on the wand does not allow it to completely retract itself. He could only use its twig-like hand to clasp the wand tremblingly, and the hair on his head, which had turned emerald green, could not help but tremble. For fear of falling, it didn't even dare to let go briefly to communicate with Gretel. Fortunately, Grete noticed it and silently lowered the flying altitude. However, this height is still difficult for Groot to accept. Considering that it had been nurturing the wand tirelessly for 3 months. Grete rubbed the sprouts as a sign of comfort. "It's okay. I won't let you fall. Be brave and stick your head out to take a look at the scenery." The more Gretel comforted him, the more frightened little Groot became. He even rolled up the buds on his head, trying not to expose any of his body. Gretel had no choice but to shake his head helplessly and speed up to fly towards Breston, where the portkey was. According to his speed, it would only take an hour To get to Preston from here, long-term pain is not as good as short-term pain, and it won't have back pain anyway, so let the little guy shrink down for now. And then take it to practice its courage later. Fenrir, can you still smell him? It's hard to wait until he travels alone. We have to seize this opportunity, because there was no trace of Gretel. Selwyn had no choice but to urge, okay, always straight ahead. He flies in a straight line. Fenrir had already transformed into a giant wolf, running quickly on all fours. Straight line. Wait a minute, let's stop and look at the map. Fenrir stopped and waited for Selwyn to make his next decision. There was no way around it. As a werewolf, he was naturally not trusted by wizards. He believed that, if he was the only one who appeared, the target designated by the Dark Lord would not be captured without mercy. After all, that's when all adult wizards teach young wizards about werewolves. The advice that will definitely be given is to never be infected with the werewolf virus. It is something more terrifying than death. So, in order to complete the task assigned by the Dark Lord, and also to obtain the identity of a Death Eater that he dreamed of, no matter how unhappy he was during this trip, he would have to hold his nose and obey Selwyn's instructions. I remember correctly, the only way forward is the town of Preston. There is a key to London. He must be planning to return to London. Selwyn took a picture of the map and laughed loudly. Let's go. Let's apparate directly in front of him and ambush him. Fenrir, the target is coming soon. According to our plan, I will put him to sleep. You must pick him up. If you throw him to death, you know how the master will punish us. Also, keep your dirty saliva away. If your saliva turns him into a werewolf, you will definitely be skinned by your master. Selwyn warned. Before ducking under a thick needle pine tree. Fenrir gave Selwyn a subtle glance and reluctantly climbed to a tree in the distance. Gretel never expected that he would fly freely in the sky. Suddenly the protective spell on the school badge was activated. Realizing that she was under attack, Gretel immediately cast a utopia on herself. Then he planned to land on the ground and look for cover. No matter what the purpose of the visitor was, flying in the sky at this time would be a stupid target. Even the stupid bird knows that the hunter quickly flies away and hides after shooting. How could he not know? But who told him that he was not yet proficient in the magic of flying? No matter how fast he was, he could not avoid the magic and could only risk landing. Before he could take a look at the bunker, a burly figure suddenly appeared from a tree 10 meters away. It had sharp teeth, sharp fingers, red eyes, and sticky saliva hanging from the corners of its mouth. Hey, werewolf. Gretel uttered a national curse, stopped his falling figure, raised his wand, and pointed it at the approaching werewolf from a distance. Avada eats a big melon. The green magic spell shot out from the tip of the staff, directly erasing the werewolf, who was bent on making meritorious deeds from the world. Fenrir could not figure out two things until his death. One was how a 12-year-old wizard could cast the death curse so skillfully and be powerful enough to kill a powerful werewolf like himself in one blow. The second thing is why a cruciatus curse was shot from his back, so that he had no strength to avoid the dark green avada directly in front of him. Selwyn was originally proud, thinking that as an adult wizard, he would definitely fall into a coma if he fell asleep. Coupled with the cruciatus curse cast on Fenrir, he must have been unable to control his power under the severe pain. It would definitely scratch Gretel, and with the drool hanging from the corner of his mouth, this little wizard would be infected with the werewolf virus, no matter what point. Just when he was about to give Fenrir a shot to pieces, so that he could take Gretel back. Report to the Dark Lord that Fenrir suddenly lost control, scratched Gretel, and infected him with the virus. In order to save people, he had no choice but to eliminate Fenrir. Unfortunately, before he could break into pieces, he saw the green light representing the death curse. Looking again, the target was not unconscious at all, but easily killed Fenrir, who suddenly jumped out. It's over. As soon as this thought echoed in his mind, he was about to use Phantom to escape. But Gretel smiled and threw a potion bottle, which was scattered into mist in the air and completely enveloped Selwyn. It was the hiccup potion that came from Snape. Hiccup. The continuous hiccups prevented Selwyn from reciting any complete spell. Seal the throat, lock the tongue, imprison quickly, and petrify everything. Then, a series of curses caught Selwyn off guard. Why Do you think Mr. Newt and Mrs. Tinner can trust me to set off alone? Selwyn's eyes were full of anger and fear, his whole body stiff and his head buried in a pile of pine needles. What makes me angry is that a loyal servant who has been with the Dark Lord for several years is not as good as a mudblood who has only been with him for a few months. What is frightening is that this mudblood is so cruel and ruthless, no less cruel than the Dark Lord himself. At the age of 12, he can release the killing curse at the drop of a hat. Time goes back to the morning of the month after I came to America. When Grete woke up and picked up his wand, he felt the attachment of the wand in his hand. Like an admiring child, and like a snuggle connected by blood. As if blessed, Gretel used Avada, which was also the legacy left to him by his dear teacher Tom. Although there was no target for the spell. The spell was not released in the end. But Gretel was sure that he had finally reached the state that Ollivander said was completely compatible with the wand. His wand no longer resisted the dark spell he was casting. Even if the core of the wand is made of unicorn hair. From that day on, there was finally no obstacle to his development of attack spells. However, he was still influenced by Professor Voldemort. At this critical moment of life and death, he subconsciously used the death curse. There is no way, after absorbing the legacy left by Professor Tom, it is equivalent to having decades more experience in curses at the critical moment of life and death. How could he hold back? Naturally, he would do it as quickly as possible. It has been posted. Good night, fellow book lovers. Ask for reading, ask for votes, ask for everything, and show your heart. Small Thea to Gretel. Dr. Scamander, I want to practice my spell. What should I do with Trace? Newt, Trace. Why should we consider traces? Do you think the British Ministry of Magic can still control the Americas? How can they be so capable? America? Magical Congress of the United States of America didn't tie any traces on you. Grete, smiling. I see. My proficiency has improved. Thanks to Professor Tom Riddle Voldemort for the experience he sent me. I would like to play a song for the professor to send him a happy journey. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Home. I have a question to ask Mr. Death Eater. How can I pry your mouth open? Gretel asked as he squatted in front of Selwyn and rubbed his chin. However, Selwyn's appearance was indeed a little disgraceful, with his head upside down and stuck in pine needles. The clothes on his left arm had long been completely torn off by Gretel. Gretel was originally confused as to who was this worthless person who actually attacked him, an underage wizard. While searching for the loot, the dark mark on Selwyn's left arm cleared up his doubts. Selwyn didn't intend to be adamant. He just wanted to quickly tell Gretel the order he accepted in order to find a glimmer of hope for survival. I know that you Death Eaters are very strict with your mouth. After all, you are die-hard loyalists of the Dark Lord. So, try the methods commonly used by you Death Eaters. Cut out the bones. Gretel would not be merciful to people like this who wanted his own life. Moreover, he believed that the dear Dark Lord would definitely not attack him, at least not now. Just like he believed that as long as there was a chance, the Dark Lord would never give up on making a comeback. Therefore, there must be something hidden here. That poor werewolf had disbelief on his face until he died. The disbelief was not for him, but for this fellow Death Eater on the ground, whom he had trusted for 3 months. Selwyn never knew the Cruciatus curse could be so painful. No wonder he could easily get the information he wanted from other wizards when he interrogated them in the past. The feeling that he couldn't live but couldn't die made him feel that death was the best destination. From the skin, from the bone marrow, from every inch of the body, it rushes crazily to the brain, as if all the organs are wailing in pain. That kind of pain, even though the body had been petrified and imprisoned, still broke through the curse, and the whole person could not stop twitching. Fortunately, the spell didn't last long. It was just a second, but it felt like he had just walked out of hell. When the Cruciatus curse stopped, he wanted to beg, but his imprisoned body did not give him this chance. There was only one thought in his mind. No wonder the Dark Lord asked them to kidnap the people back. This is a born Dark Wizard, a more qualified Dark Wizard than all of them. Even the cruelest Death Eater would not have been able to cast the unforgivable curse so smoothly when he was Gretel's age. The unforgivable curse requires, in addition to the necessary gestures and spells, a strong personal will added to the spell. What the killing curse requires is a strong killing intent. If it lacks killing intent, it will not even be as good as a splitting spell. The same goes for the Cruciatus Curse, which is not a spell that ordinary people can cast. In addition to requiring extremely high magical realm and magical energy. What's more, when casting a spell, the caster needs to have the will to cause the other person pain and therefore feel happy in order to successfully cast the spell. And the stronger this will, the greater the pain caused by the Cruciatus Curse. Selwyn could be sure that his Cruciatus Curse was not as effective as Gretel's. In Selwyn's horrified eyes, Gretel used the Cruciatus Curse again, cut out the bones, stopping for a second. Seeing Selwyn's expression of pain, Gretel stopped the spell again. No, if you transform it like this, all emotions will be transformed into the perverted pleasure acquired by the Cruciatus Curse. If the mood swings violently when casting a spell, it will make the person crazy in an instant, so it needs to be corrected. Set a threshold to control the transformed emotions within a certain range. Gretel was writing as he spoke, and after a while, he put away his notes, and the Cruciatus Curse modification second was released. Cut out the bones. Selwyn's expression was obviously much calmer this time. At least he didn't break free from the confinement spell temporarily due to pain. Although, for Selwyn, this kind of pain is still unbearable. The only difference may be that it changes from the 18th level of hell to the 10th level. At this moment, Selwyn didn't want to think about whether he could survive at all. He just wanted Gretel to give him a happy life, and he just wanted to stop torturing him for fun. In his mind, Gretel's image had changed from an ordinary first-year wizard to a cruel pervert. In fact, Gretel tried the Cruciatus Curse on the golem when he discovered that the wand could no longer resist the dark curse. According to the feedback provided by the golem, the Cruciatus Curse was not even as painful as a direct strike with his wand. Professor Tom's legacy of memories only taught him how to cast spells. He was not taught how to use an ordinary person's 3 views to enhance the power of the Cruciatus Curse. Finally, I found the solution by chance in a thrift store on Market Street. It was a worn-out magic doll that carried the childhood memory of an unknown wizard. It had a magic spell on it that could absorb sadness and turn it into happiness. By analyzing this curse, Gretel successfully changed the Cruciatus Curse into a version that suited him. Probably even Professor Fu could not have imagined that Gretel could be such a genius. Selwyn could never have imagined that he now wanted to die just to get rid of the fate of continuing to be the experimental subject of this perverted wizard. Endless experiments until his spirit became a little trance-like. Gretel realized that he did not yet have the blockade action on Selwyn and the curse of the mouthpiece. All curses come to an end. Even though he was mentally embarrassed, his face still looked calm and calm. Feeling that his body had regained its freedom, Selwyn's eyes were full of surprise. But looking at the 2 wands held in Gretel's hands, he gave up the idea of escape in despair. Tell him his origins in detail. Only then did Grete realize how determined Professor Tom was to win over him. In order to die quickly, Selwyn confessed his malice towards Gretel and also explained the reason why the werewolf Fenrir lost control. After all, Gretel was not a psychopath. After getting the information he wanted, he sent this cruel Death Eater away with a death curse. Clean the battlefield and clean up the traces of battle. Clear water is like a spring, a fountain of water from the wand. Doused the embers left by the blazing fire. Cleaning the battlefield is a virtue. Gretel weighed the money bag in his hand and praised that he was indeed a pure blood of the 28 Holy Family. He was rich. As for the werewolf in the distance, Grete had no choice to search for it. It's not that I don't like it, I'm just worried about accidentally contracting the werewolf virus. Besides, there was no need to search for that person who looked like he was in ragged clothes. Groot, hide it in your pocket. It may not be very comfortable next time. The key to the door from Braceston back to London was a tin can fixed on the ground that was so old that no one wanted it. Wizards have always protected portkeys this way, sometimes with a broken boot, sometimes with a rotten piece of wood. Anyway, just try not to attract the attention of muggles as much as possible. Grete prepared himself mentally, held a bottle of demulcent prepared in advance, and plucked up the courage to walk up. Even though he was prepared in advance, Grete still sat down on the ground dizzy. After forcing down the palliative, Gretel raised his wand. Thank you to book friends and bosses for their monthly support. Book friend 20220205113525245 monthly ticket support. The number of words is increasing, and I have seen many recommendation votes from familiar names. I would like to thank all the book lovers for their support and support. Small Theatre Selwyn, Dark Lord, you will be usurped. I will wait for you below. Fenrir, die, you backstabbing bastard. Selwyn, don't you have any intention of stabbing me? Do you still need me to teach you about striking first and gaining the upper hand? No wonder the Dark Lord looks down on you. Bar Voldemort, he is indeed my student. I like him more and more. Chapter 50 The Leaky Cauldron. Please follow up. With a deafening bang, or 3-story, bright purple bus appeared in front of Gretel's eyes. The words night bus were embossed in gold letters on the bright windshield. There was a sound of steam, the car door opened, and a wizard wearing a purple uniform with big, striking ears poked his head out. Welcome aboard the night bus, emergency passenger transport for witches or wizards in distress. Just stick out your wand and get in the car, and we'll take you wherever you want to go. My name is Stan Sand Parker and I'm a conductor on the night bus. If there was any other way, Grete would not want to take this night bus. After all, it can be known from past rumors that its comfort is almost 0. But now that he was back in London, the traces bound to his body made him give up the idea of using magic to travel. Why not choose the Muggle mode of transportation? Gretel is not crazy, yet Voldemort had absolutely locked onto him the moment he came back via the portkey. If he dared to relax, the Death Eaters wouldn't mind joining him in an exciting battle royale in the Muggle world. Gretel knew his level, and he was able to kill Fenrir and Selwyn with an unexpected sneak attack. They just lost Jingxiao carelessly because of the information asymmetry. Gretel really didn't feel like he was capable of fighting Death Eater's head on. Especially in this situation where Voldemort is bound to win over him. There were people who had crossed the ocean as far away as America, and now that they were back in Great Britain, the number of people who could be mobilized was definitely beyond his imagination. Even if the backbone of the Death Eaters were imprisoned in Azkaban, he, a quasi second year wizard, could not compete with them. Night bus is the most suitable and only choice for him now. Rejecting the offer of a piece of chocolate from 14 Siccus, Gretel handed Sampak 11 silver Siccus. Diagon Alley, thank you. The driver was an older wizard with glasses with thick lenses hanging from his ears. Grete was sure that it must have been a long time since he changed his glasses, because on the way to Diagon Alley, his car stumbled, always twisting back when it was about to hit the sidewalk. If lampposts, mailboxes, and trash cans on the street hadn't escaped on their own, Gretel believes that within a few days, there would be an urban legend in Great Britain. Grete has already thought about the content of the legend. Legend has it that in Great Britain, there is an invisible monster that always likes to destroy public facilities in Great Britain. Wherever it passes, lampposts will be broken, mailboxes will be twisted, and trash cans will be trampled. All you can do is hide honestly on the sidewalk. The sidewalk has a barrier that it cannot enter. Don't try to uncover its secrets. Gretel resisted the urge to get carsick and jumped out in a hurry when he reached the door of the leaky cauldron. Ignore the words of the conductor Sampak behind him. Night bus is committed to taking every wizard out of trouble, and you are welcome to take it next time. Gretel swore that compared to the night bus, the apparition was definitely comfortable. Touching his pocket, he regretted not preparing an extra bottle of demulcent. After taking a few deep breaths, I finally managed to calm my churning stomach. Ding dong. Several drunken wizards who had been drinking in broad daylight looked up and then went back to the wine table. Gretel didn't expect to see an acquaintance here. Hi, Gretel, Hannah. Abbott sat at the bar and greeted Gretel happily. In their first year, they took potions and flying lessons together for a whole year. It wasn't until Grete walked to the bar that Anna noticed his expression. Grete, you don't look too good. You didn't come here on the night bus, did you? Under Hannah's shocked eyes, Gretel nodded. Oh my gosh, that's really unfortunate. Do you want a glass of butterbeer to wash it down? Don't worry, I'll treat you. Forget it, no need. I don't like drinking. If you can, please give me a glass of warm water. Certainly. Hannah turned and ducked into the bar kitchen, and within a few minutes she brought back a glass of warm water, along with a plate of sour lollipops. Eat something. I learned from other wizards that when you get motion sickness, eating something sour can make you feel better. You know, our bar is always so busy and everyone can be seen. I see a lot of wizards like you coming off the night bus every day. Gretel rested for a while before his face turned rosy again. Hannah was flipping through the second grade textbook while curiously asking about his current situation. I heard that you were targeted by a mysterious person. Is it true? Don't worry, the leaky cauldron will ensure the safety of its customers. Are you planning to live here? I guarantee that no one will be able to break into the leaky cauldron and rob people. This little girl has never been so talkative in school. She always looks nervous, especially when Snape was staring at him in potions class. Maybe I really need to stay here for a few days if Hogwarts can't let me check in early. I came here today to go to Diagon Alley to prepare textbooks for the start of school. I didn't buy the Defense Against the Dark Arts textbooks I need for the new semester in America. Although he didn't want to spend the money. America? Have you been to America? How is it there? Isn't it fun? Hearing Gretel's words, Hannah's eyes almost glowed with excitement. It's okay, I think it's not much different from London, except of course the Muggle world. What? You went to the Muggle world? The little girl was really excited and even attracted the attention of the bar guests. The real owner of the bar emerged from the kitchen, approached and patted Hannah on the head. Hannah, your friend? Do you mind introducing me? Sure. Enough. If he is not the savior, he is not even qualified to be remembered. Thinking about it, Gretel was also taken to Diagon Alley by Hagrid before Harry. Obviously, Boss Tom did not remember him. McGarrett, a first year of Ravenclaw, who was in class with Miss Hannah. Nice to meet you, Boss Tom. After Gretel introduced himself, the bar owner Tom suddenly realized what he was doing, patted his head and laughed. I remember when you entered the first grade, Hagrid took you to Diagon Alley, but I remember you were skinny and small at the time. But this year you look like a big kid. By the way, our Hannah wrote about you, saying that there is a genius at their level this year, and it's you, right? Hearing Tom's words, Hannah blushed suddenly and pushed him back to the kitchen. Go and cook. I'm hungry. Tom smiled heartily. Okay, I'll cook. Leave your classmates here to eat at noon. I'll cook more. Hannah didn't agree for Gretel. She just looked at him. Then, I'm sorry to trouble you. Gretel and Hannah have a pretty good relationship, and they often helped Hannah with potions classes in private during the last school year. Hannah felt relieved and said, Uncle Tom, please cook more. Gretel has a big appetite. I saw him eating several steaks by himself in the restaurant. The relationship between Tom and Hannah has not been found. The author pretends to be an uncle from the same family as Hannah. If there is any error, the official version shall prevail. By the way, Grete, don't you still want to buy textbooks? I'll go with you. There are a lot of textbooks, and it's easy for 2 people to carry them. This time Hannah didn't wait for Grete to agree. He ran to the kitchen to give an explanation, grabbed Gretel and ran straight to the patio. Hannah Abbott should be in and out of Diagon Alley so often that she doesn't need to count bricks like Hagrid. He casually stretched out his wand and struck it, accurately opening the entrance to Diagon Alley. Thanks to book friend another month boss for your monthly ticket support. Thank you very much. Hannah Abbott is not the heroine. Please don't get me wrong. Hannah is written here to develop the plot of the new semester and Cedric Diggory. Dear book lovers, good night and sweet dreams. Small theater. Hannah, Grete, can you tell me what's the difference between America and us? Have you had any strange experiences in America? Gretel, it's almost the same as London, but it's a little more free. Yes, you can see American style AI every day on Market Street. It wasn't any bizarre experience. I just went there to hide from the Dark Lord's minions. Referring to killing 2 Death Eaters. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.